Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Is that working? Yeah. Just before we start Children's Committee this evening, I just wanted to talk about children and especially Stockport, what's going on there. So I just wanted to make a comment, hopefully from us all, that our hearts go out to the children and their families. The tragic event in Stockport highlight an epidemic of violence against women and young girls in our country, which urgently needs addressing. We must all work hard to build and unite a compassionate society for everybody. Thank you. That was for Southport. Okay, I'm going to open the meeting now. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies from Councillor Lamas, who's having a wonderful time in America.
Lucky boy. Anybody else? Smither?
I've just received.
Okay, and we've got Demola is on holiday, and we've got Douglas this evening stepping in, and hopefully he may be joining us as well. Thank you. And can I give a welcome, apologies, from Lenny and Leanne. I hope you noticed the seatings have changed to just make it a bit more child-friendly. And then we're moving on to item 2, which is the record of the meeting. Any comments about the minutes?
I'm sorry.
I'm having mic trouble. I do apologise. Oh, hang on. It's flashing. Ooh.
I also have apologies from Archie from NYC for this evening, and Sharon Doherty as well.
Okay, thank you. So, record of the meeting. Can I sign the record of the meeting that was held on the 12th of June as correct? Thank you. Any urgent matters arising? Item 3? None. Item 4, any interest or significant whipping? None. Okay, well, it's a really good evening for our children in Medway because our themed approach is obviously working, and we've got 4 reports to discuss. So we're going to start with the Youth Justice Plan. Before we start, I just wanted to say a few words because the last time I saw our wonderful James Williams was when we came to visit your service, and we had that lovely evening, and James was our late Director of Public Services. He was always awesome. He had a great sense of humour, he was kind, and he had such humanity, and the legacy that he left has been amazing because every interaction with any one of his team, his magic has sprinkled, and they just have those complementary skills and enthusiasm to make Medway a better and healthy place. Thank you. So the Youth Justice Plan 2024 to 25, item 5A.
Yes, thank you for that, and your tribute to James, because he truly was a wonderful chair of our board. So this is the Youth Justice Plan. It's a requirement of every local authority to have a Youth Justice Plan. This is the second year in which the National Youth Justice Board has specified what the contents of the plan need to be. And I think that's been a useful process because it's made specific issues such as disproportionality for black and ethnic children that are big issues in the national youth justice agenda. It's kind of put them on the map. and it's made the Medway board aware of these issues and start to look at them. The plan writes to those national headings, and in completing the plan last year, the process, I kind of went to partners, I talked to them prior to writing to the plan, and then I wrote the plan. Kind of paraphrased partners and their contributions. But I think what's significantly different about this year's plan is that large sections of it are written by partner agencies, by the police, by the Violence Reduction Unit, by Children's Social Care. So I think it's a stronger plan in that respect, in that it will be the sense of ownership of the plan and delivering it will be increased by partners having written it. And throughout the plan, there is a discourse with children. So we talked to 15 children. We asked more, but with 15 children of the cohort that we're working with at the time agreed to participate, and their parents and carers. And their comments are included at the top of each of the national priorities. And what I'm hoping is that the plan has a dialogue with those comments, so that in that sense, the plan delivers the principle of child first, of firm, strong collaboration with children. So that's my kind of introduction to the plan, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up to the floor. Adrian?
Thank you, Jo. I think this carries on quite a good tradition here in Medway. We've always been proud of the way our yacht has worked, and it's good to see it, not, new ideas and things coming in. And so I did spot, reading it this time, a number of things which I didn't understand. So I've got two or three little, four of these items. So there's mention of use of outcome 22. So that was not familiar to me. Another thing which stuck out reading the report, that Medway's high rate of first-time entrants seems to be, we seem to be higher than for a lot of other areas. Is there any specific reason for that? The development of the Connect app, does this work in the same way as the Momo app? And how many of our young people are actually using it? And finally, could you explain more about the Kent and Medway criminal exploitation tool? So please excuse my ignorance on those matters, but I would like to know more. Thank you.
Sure, thank you for those questions. So outcome 22 and your question about first-time entrants, I think, are linked. So I'll go in on the first-time entrants bit first. So first-time entrants are those children who get their first statutory disposal in the youth justice system. So a disposal that could go on their record and be there into their adult life if they were applying for a job with an enhanced disclosure. So we want to prevent children from becoming first-time entrants, and that is why it's part of our sort of national data and indicator set. The National Youth Justice Board looks at our data in respect to first-time entrants, reoffending, and the use of custody. All the research shows that the likelihood of children reoffending increases when they're in the system. I don't know the exact mechanisms of that, whether it's kind of, experience of being labelled or whatever. So there is a big drive to stop children becoming first-time entrants. So your question as to why that's happening locally, as the plan indicates, it's a Kent Medway phenomena. So almost, you know, and I'm not saying this in a kind of blaming way, I think it is something to do with how the police deliver out-of-court disposals. It is to do with the processes by which children are arrested and eventually their trajectory heads them towards court. Some areas have a very robust response to diversion, some areas don't. And I think what this plan is aspiring to, and I thank the police, because I think that the arrest of children and the decision to take them to court is ultimately a police and CPS, Crown Prosecution Service decision. So I thank the police for engaging on this issue, because what this plan is aspiring to is to look intently as to the opportunities as to when we can divert those children coming into the system. And that is the discussion around Outcome 22. So what Outcome 22 is, it's an outcome that's on the police list of outcomes, like cautions, youth cautions, and there's Outcome 22. It is used in some areas as a deferred prosecution, meaning that the child undertakes some diversionary work with the youth offending team, and on the completion of that work, they then are not prosecuted. A decision is made not to prosecute. In Kent and so that method gives a lot of confidence to the police in many areas to use it for perhaps some more serious offences. In Medway, it's not used in that way, but it is used as a non-statutory outcome. So it enables the police to provide an intervention to a child without them having anything on their record. And that intervention involves the youth justice team delivering work with that child and their family. So that's something that we are tracking the use of. We're keeping a record of how often it's being used. Because nationally the picture is that those areas that do use Outcome 22 well and with confidence of the police, confidence of the public, that they reduce their rates of first-time entrants. Less children come into the system. Does that answer your question in respect to those first two bits? The Connect app that is mentioned in the plan is something that we developed locally. It was it was funded by money from the National Youth Justice Board. It's not like Mind of My Own. It's very different. It's trying to explore with children their plans for the future and their identity. It's an app that initiates a conversation between the child and their worker. And it's something that we and the National Youth Justice Board felt was worth exploring because children are often on their phones. And we wanted a way to kind of have conversations with children on their phones and to have an app that enabled meaningful conversations. So it's something that we developed in collaboration with the University of Loughborough, who are the kind of national leads in the whole area of child first practice and research net practice. Its use has had some success. I think some children have been suspicious of it. A yacht app on your phone. Others have warmly welcomed it because that's how they like to communicate on their phone. So you know, it's had some success, and it is something that you know, a number of other youth justice teams are interested in, and you know, it may be rolled out to them in the future.
Sorry, the last question was explain more about the Kent and Medway criminal exploitation tool. Thank you.
So in our assessment tool that we're sort of mandated to use by the National Youth Justice Board, there are questions about criminal exploitation, there are questions about sexual exploitation. The sexual exploitation toolkit's well used in the council, and there is a criminal exploitation toolkit. Sort of, it's a way of exploring with the child what's happening in their life, helping them through a series of questions, perhaps understand whether they are being exploited or not. It's a process. It's making sure that we can say that we have thoroughly explored that theme with children, because nationally, county lines, gangs, the whole theme of criminal exploitation is very important in the youth justice world. Thank you.
Happy, Adrian? Yeah? Okay. Sharon, please.
Thanks, Jo. I was just reading the bit of children with additional needs, and obviously they're the most vulnerable, and especially with people with undiagnosed neurodiverse and speech and language, because they could have really spiky profiles and just are good targets. And I see that there was a shortage of speech and language therapists, and there was some problems. I just wondered, it says that you're working to commission some new work in this area, and hopefully it'll be in place soon, but could you tell us any more about that, or how it's going forward, or have we got a deadline, or?
We discussed this very issue at our board yesterday, because, I mean, clearly speech and language is really important in the children that we work with. There are high levels of children who have speech and language issues. When we meet children, we screen them for speech and language issues, so we're kind of collating that data, and we pick up that, you know, we do have high levels of children with those issues. And there is a national shortage of speech and language therapists. In last year, and this was a piece of work that James started from kind of public health funding, we looked at providers who are kind of providing innovative solutions of doing the speech and language assessments online with children. The kind of the science behind this is now developed, and speech and language therapists are providing online assessments and reports. We had a provider lined up, but for whatever reason, they didn't continue in the commissioning process. We have another provider lined up. I am optimistic that that this work will be continued, and we have a meeting in 2 weeks' time with them to explore it further. So it's a work. It is a work in progress. But there are other things that we're going to explore, aren't there, to try and address those children's needs.
Okay.
George.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Jo. Firstly, Ken, I just want to thank you for the work you do, because I know you work, very hard in this space, particularly on the plan, and also, more widely in terms of the way it fits in with the wider council. I just had a quick question in the not in the report, but in the report from you to the committee. You referenced that funding for the next financial year hasn't yet been agreed. I just wondered if you had any update on that, please.
I don't. We had a letter last week saying that we're still waiting to hear the final amount from the National Youth Justice Board, what they're going to give us. They have said that it won't be any less than it was last year. So in terms of the funding that I included at the back of the plan in the appendix, it won't be less than that. We're hopeful it's going to be more, but they've told us for inclusions in our plan and planning, that's the figure that we need to use. Yeah, so I think it was to do with the election, central government departments looking at their budgets, so we haven't had an update as of yet. We had a letter last week telling us we're still waiting.
George, I'll just ask the financial expert, Maria.
Hiya. So that is absolutely correct. I would say as well that's probably the same process we've gone through almost every year with this particular budget, so it's not an unusual situation. It's a bit unusual because we had the election in the middle, which has probably delayed it slightly, but it's not an unusual situation for this.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I've got Mark next. Leah, then.
So, firstly, I thought the AQO accreditation, the fact that the children can earn that whilst doing reparative work was great, but I wondered what sort of things they can earn those qualifications in and how you match children with the work that they're doing with the qualifications that they might want to use later in life. That was the first one. And then around first-time entrants, I had similar questions to Adrian, but it was if we have data sets that identify kind of the high-risk children, so things that you might not have necessarily thought of, like from the top of my head, like children that come from particularly large families have a higher propensity to end up in the youth justice set. I just wondered if we had any data sets so we can identify what the high-risk groups are. And then the last one was just, I worry about the... So all of the girls' responses in there say that they feel they're treated the same as boys, which I think from a child's point of view is great, but when you look at it from an adult, actually girls will offend differently and offend for different reasons, and they're much more likely to have been exploited and all those kind of things. So I did read in the paragraph underneath that there's individuality in there and the journey of identity is what's important, but I wonder what that looks like on the ground to a child. So how is that tailored to them, whether that be gender or race or any of the different things that might change the way that they interact with youth justice? Thank you.
Thank you for that. The AQA work has been going on for a year now. We initiated it because, as you can see from the education responses from children in the plan, it was one area where children kind of universally, or the children we work with, spoke in the same voice, and they mainly had a negative experience of education. And what we wanted to do is, even in small steps, is have some experience of accomplishing something educationally whilst they're with us. We felt that that was a very important in terms of strengths-based practice of working with children. So the AQAs that we deliver are varied. We work with children, it's called reparation, it's like unpaid work in the community. It's a part of a number of orders that we get given from the courts to deliver, and we want to use that time. It can be up to 100 hours, it can be maximum of 240 hours within a year, and we want to use that time constructively with children so that they gain positive experiences rather than experiencing it as a punishment. So that those can be, one of our reparation workers is very much involved in kind of building and trades work, and they can get various AQAs related to that from that. We have projects with the Dementia Cafe in Medway. Children get AQAs through doing that work. And we try to identify those children's interests, and we're situated in a youth centre, so children can get AQAs in music, but all the time sort of trying to use those positive experiences. Like in the music studio, one of our workers is very proficient and skilled and creative with using music, but trying to use that, to explore children's offending and their trajectories and their lives through the use of music, but in that process giving them AQAs. So some of them are more kind of interest related, some of them are more offence related, some of them are more kind of vocationally related. Using it in different ways, but the kind of common theme is that we want a sort of strengths-based approach for working with children. The first-time entrants, yes, we are looking at data, and I have quarterly meetings with the National Youth Justice Board, and it's the issue that they raise about Kent and Medway. They want to know about our first-time entrants, and they want to know that we're exploring that data. And I can tell you what I haven't got the data here. I presented papers to our board about this, so we have kind of done a deep dive in terms of offence type and the background of those children, but we haven't done, I think, enough exploring their experiences prior to coming to the yacht and the missed opportunities that then resulted in becoming first-time entrants. I know it's work we need to do, and I know the first-time entrance is high on our agenda for this year, and it's something that we will be exploring that data more. So hopefully in the future I'll be able to give you a better response to that question. In terms of working with girls, so our approach and it's kind of sketched out in the plan, is there was a really important piece of research into children coming out of custody called that NACRO, the National Association for the Care and Rehabilitation of Offenders, did about 5 years ago, called Beyond Youth Custody. And it looked at planning with children coming out of custody and why children are kind of going back into custody. And the basic message of it was that yachts are very good at setting up plans with children in terms of you're going to go to this education, you're going to do that program and all of this kind of stuff. But unless children's identity journey was engaged with, that those plans wouldn't stick. So our approach has been that with all children, we have a firm focus on the theme of identity. With most children, we will do work based around the questions: who am I, who do I want to be, and how am I going to get there? And that kind of practice, it's been when NACRO did their Identity Lens Toolkit, which was distributed to every yacht in the country. Some of the Medway examples were included in that. So it is an area of practice and the theme of identity that we are committed to. And that doesn't mean that we treat everyone the same. I think that the focus on identity means that we are really trying to grapple with the nuances as to how everyone is different. That's where it's coming from. I think that, it requires us to listen to children's stories and listen to how they perceive their identity and to respond to that. So I know it's not like, you know, we haven't got a girls group or whatever, but I do think, you know, we are committed to addressing the theme of identity with all children that we work with, and that doesn't mean that we're treating them all the same. It means that we're treating them all kind of in a responsive way. I mean, I think our staff team, you know, we have a good mixture in terms of ethnicity, gender, age. So I think, you know, we've got a staff team that can respond to the children we work with as well.
Douglas?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ken, for your feedback thus far. I've taken a look at some of the issues I find pertaining to the Medway Youth Plan. Although I find it very useful in terms of it being a preventative type model you're trying to introduce, there's a niche area I think is underrepresented within the document, and that is the experiences of young people fleeing as refugees from war-torn countries. As we've seen, there's a prevalence of people arriving into the UK from such circumstances, and Medway, as well as the University of Kent, being focused on being a city of sanctuary and welcoming. Their interventions, I don't think, truly speak to young people that are coming from that sort of horrific experience, such as how can we better integrate them into society, overcoming some of the speech and language difficulties that make people feel more isolated and more prone to lashing out against the system as a way of behaving or just expressing how they feel. I've spoken to a lot of young people going through this in my experience. So trauma-informed educational practices, I'm not too sure if we have any within Kent, but given that Kent is literally where a lot of refugees come, we should be looking to engage any trauma-informed educational services. So just thinking, how much of that how much data do you have regarding the plight of young people that come as refugees featuring in the system?
We do keep that data. We do track. I mean, we had a number of children a few years ago, unaccompanied asylum seekers, placed mainly by Kent in Medway, and we were aware of the things that you spoke about. I'm not sure how effective historically we've been at responding to those journeys and the trauma. I just want to say one more thing about it though. So we have a worker in our team who we've recruited from London, whose job was working with children who were referred through the national referral mechanism in respect to exploitation, and she has a number of years' experience of working with the children that you are describing, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to recruit that expertise into our team. So.
Celia, thanks, Ken.
That's better. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add to that. So Medway schools have all committed to the trauma-informed approach. 70 out of 100 have had the training, and it's an ongoing training package. And the virtual school are trauma-informed, and where those young people need specific work, they do additional training with schools to help them be integrated in a trauma-informed way into the provision.
No, thank you. So can I just come back very quickly? No, thank you for that. Just in terms of monitoring trends as they come, how close are you to the pulse in terms of, is this emerging problem, challenge that we're having to try and navigate? And if so, are we going to be best equipped to put resources in place to mitigate that potential harm for not being able to provide the interventions in time?
We do keep a very close eye on our data and, you know, the trends of the kinds of children and the backgrounds that they come with to us. So we would be, but following on from what Celia said, we in our staff with Kent Youth Offending Service, we bidded for some money in respect to training the staff in trauma-informed practice, and we had Kate Cairns Associates trained our staff in respect to trauma-informed practice, and it was very good training, and so I think, you know, that is a theme that we are running with. But the numbers are small. The numbers are small. In the youth offending cohort, the numbers of the children that you've described are small. I don't think we have any at the moment. We have plenty of children who've experienced trauma, and but not refugees.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, could I just make a few comments? I just wondered, Ken, what the secret of your success was, because you seem to be, when we came to have our visit, and also in the statistics in the report, being able to succession plan and sort of grow your own youth workers, and you have a complementary skill of different skills and expertise. Music, I was particularly overwhelmed by the young people working in the Dementia Cafe, but also the ones that are training for CSC and doing like bricklaying and trades like that, because, you know, having an extension going on myself, we much need trade people, don't we? So, you know, they are really good skills and qualifications to have, and your staff go across the ages as well. You know, the younger member of staff had a really lot of good role models to help her to flourish, but all of them really had each other, you know, at the source of everything. They were a team, weren't they? So what do you attribute to your success there, please?
Thank you, that's a really kind comment. Success, we'll wait till we're inspected to talk about success. But I mean, in terms of the staff team, you know, I'm really proud of the staff team. I'm lucky in that the staff team are so motivated and they stick around. And I think having them stick around means that they can develop their skills, they can acquire practice knowledge, they can, you know, develop. And so we've been lucky. And we look for people from diverse backgrounds. We're not just after people from yacht backgrounds. We want people with creative experience, with music, with sports backgrounds, with, you know, different kinds of backgrounds. We look for people that are passionate to do the work. And we'll see how they're successful we are in due course.
Well, it certainly seemed that you had all those complementary skills. Obviously, we have a new Labour government, and we have been already working with James Timpson, and, you know, I'm heartened by the restorative approach. Looking at your key priorities and some of the work you already do, you're embracing that already. Do you see strengths and opportunities in that, or are you concerned at all with the national agenda?
No, I mean, restorative approaches are at the absolute heart of what we do, absolute heart of it. And working with victims is, and the community is absolutely central to yacht practice. And, you know, we have a very passionate victim restorative lead in our team at the moment who makes sure that that victim's voice is felt in all the work that we do. So, you know, yeah, that some of the best work is the work that happens around victims and helping children take responsibility for the harm they've caused.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the plan. It was really easy to read, but also your clear priorities, and having 6 of them, you can home in on it. And then obviously when I checked against all the statutory requirements, you're meeting them all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Leah.
Sorry, I just wanted to sneak one more in that I've missed off my notes. It was just around the outcome 22s and things. I think it's a really good idea. I think all of the reasons that we laid out earlier, I think it's better than kind of tarring people with a brush. But I wondered if we will still have that data again, so we can see if there are, rather than just less people engaging with yacht, less young people engaging in criminal activity in the first place. So will we still get the data so we can analyse the trends?
Yes, very much. And I think in promoting a new approach and disposal, you know, we are very keenly looking at the reoffending data around outcome 22. We need to know that that approach is effective, and that the kind of the stronger emphasis on diversion doesn't have any unintended consequences. So we are looking very keenly and hoping to improve our data analysis of the use of diversionary measures.
Okay, thank you. And back to you then, Vice Chair.
I move that the committee recommends full council to approve the Medway Youth Justice Plan 24 to 25. And it is.
And is that seconded? Yes, seconded by Adrian. Okay, thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, now we're moving on to 5B, and welcome back, Amy. You were new when you first came, and it's lovely to see you smiling and brightly here today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Amy Coombs. I'm Head of Adoption Partnership South East. We're a regional adoption agency, and we provide adoption services for Medway, Bexley and Kent. I think it's important to note, and I'm sure you've read the report, that adoption work only happens because we work closely in collaboration with the really hard-working Medway children's social workers. So we work together to provide the best outcomes possible for children who need to be adopted. So I think the report sort of says it all around the activity we've been doing over the last 12 months, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Lovely, thanks. Who wants to be first? Mark?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Some really good stuff in there. I'm reading about a high number of applications coming through and the good focus on adoption of sibling groups, which has brought some success. Looking at the numbers for last year, seeing Medway had 4 children had placement with only 1 not linked at the moment. One thing I would like to ask a question of, so the placement order to matching decisions, I know the national target's 121. We were in a place which wasn't that great in 2021 of 237. I know last year got it down to 152, but we've had a slight increase at to 160. Just want to know what's in place to try and drive that down, because the longer they're waiting on both sides, because looking at the other times before stage 1, and then from stage 1 to stage 2 before the 121 then kicks in, potentially for people wanting to adopt, this could be over a year, if not longer. So we can get the end bit, which is targeted down, but I just want to know what's in place to help that. Thank you.
Yes, I predicted this would be a question, so I do have some sort of helpful further information about that. So in the last year, yes, there was an increase between that point that the court grant a placement order which gives Medway permission to be able to place a child for adoption to the point of matching. So there were 18 children that were in that cohort that had a placement order granted within that 12-month spell and then were matched for adoption. Out of those 18, there were 2 children that were particular outliers. And obviously it's so difficult because actually these are all children that need adoptive families, and some of these children do have really complex needs. And 2 of the children did affect Medway's averages. The good thing is that these 2 children who had extremely complex needs, one actually is a life-limiting health condition, have now been placed for adoption. But what it meant was it did take longer to find adopters for them. If we take the 2 children out of the 18 and we then look at the average of the 16 children, the average amount of days comes down to 115 days for Medway children. So it shows they did significantly affect. But what we will always do is if it's the right plan for the child, we will keep looking, and that will then mean when I come to these meetings, I will explain why the timescales are such, because we want to get this right for the children. And with our adopter applications, again, we're needing to make sure we have the most robust, thorough assessments of our potential applicants. And in particular, you'll see the timescales for stage 1. They do take longer than as prescribed to take. However, nationally, you will see that all our AAs are taking longer than that 2-month timescale because those checks, the DBSs, the health assessments, do bring it over the timescales, but what we want to ensure is that we make the right decisions for people to become adopters that are safe decisions.
Yeah, come back, Mark.
Just want to say thank you. The information come back, and that's really, really good that we know the reasons behind it, and you can understand that. But it is good that the majority are actually getting done within that time. So thank you, and continue doing the good work. Thank you.
Next on my list is George.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question, probably more for Leanne and Kelly, actually. This one, just about, I know Baroness O'Neill, Councillor Goff, and Sue Chandler, and Chris and others are very, talk very positively about the way in which the adoption partnership works, particularly as a partnership between the 3 upper tier authorities. I'm just interested from both of your perspectives. I think, Leanne, obviously you sit on the board, just about how you're finding that relationship working. Obviously Kent is the dominant borough really in terms of the size and scale, and I'm just interested to see sort of how you see that working how you're finding that working from a Medway perspective in terms of ensuring that our specific needs, which are different, albeit similar in some ways to the other 2 boroughs, are working, and how you're sort of maybe learning anything from that perhaps we could take to other services within the Directorate. Thank you.
Oh, I'll answer that. I'm very pleased with the way the partnership's working. In fact, when the partnership first started off, we had, I think, 2 outstanding local authorities and an adequate local authority, and both of those outstanding local authorities were very gracious to Medway with their time, with their resource. Medway's performance around adoption was poor, and through the partnership, it is no longer poor, and you saw that through the last ILACS inspection. So it works well. I think Amy is the head of the adoption partnership. She sits with KCC for pay and rations, but it is very much a partnership, and I have no worries on behalf of Medway at all.
Thank you. Sharon.
Thank you, Jo. Amy, I just want I'm so happy that you're here smiling, because I'm sitting here smiling at you as an adoptive parent. Yeah, it's so lovely to read that report. Early placements is a brilliant idea. I know that Newham Council years and years ago did a pilot scheme for complex needs children that they went to really experienced foster carers, and they did a wraparound service around that child, so when they went to the adoptive parent, they had everything in place, speech and language, like literally everything in place. I don't know what happened to that scheme, probably cost too much money, but it was a brilliant scheme, but like early placement. And if I have to find something, and I'm really struggling, but I'm going to do it, post-adoption support is the biggest thing that comes up with in the adoption community, and that's borne out really by the complaints. There's hardly any complaints, but the 4 complaints that were from post adoption. So I just want a bit of reassurance that there is ongoing support for because we all know that troubles can raise their heads 6 years down the line, 8 years down the line. Are we still giving that support to these adoptive parents then?
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll see in the report what we're trying to do as part of our multidisciplinary approach project is really raise the awareness with our partner agencies, with the universal services, about the needs of our children who've been adopted. Because what we see, that often there will be a view when a child is placed for adoption and they're loved, that their needs may disappear, and what we know is that they absolutely don't, and they are the most vulnerable children within our community who've had the most adverse starts in life, and experienced, significant amount of trauma, as well as fetal alcohol is a key theme at the moment we're seeing heavily, and we're really investing in training and support around that, and neurodiversity. So we're really trying to raise that profile, and we've got good news. We met with the Kent and Medway ICB. I think Leanne, I think you may have been there, and they've agreed that as part of their new contract for commissioning services, in particular CAMS, that adopted children will be categorised as one of the vulnerable groups. So we're really excited about that. What we've really learned, and I thought it was really important in the report, I needed to put in the reality that actually our families are really struggling. So we've been able to successfully get some funding from the DFE around an innovation project as a pan-regional approach, so bigger than Kent, Medway and Bexley, but actually working with Adopt South and Adoption South East in looking at piloting a scheme around keeping connected with our families. So we see our families often contact us when they are at crisis point, because they've waited a long time to become parents. They want to manage. They don't want to be calling for help. So what that sadly sometimes means is they're actually at sort of the end of their tether. Things have got so bad. So what we're going to be piloting is an approach where we sort of touch base with our families at different crucial points, and we're consulting with adoptive families at the moment about when those points will be, where we actually contact them. They have to agree to it, but where we can actually say, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? To try and create that feeling of actually we're trying to get in early before there's a crisis point. And sorry, the other thing that we're doing is developing our adoption community. So really trying to get a really strong peer support network across Medway, Kent and Bexley. So our families, we really want to prevent families from feeling isolated. And that's another theme that we see with many of our families.
Well, I'm smiling even more now because that was a brilliant answer, and it's like you read my mind with the FASD. It was like it was there, but yeah, I mean that's brilliant. I mean we couldn't ask to touch base. It lets us know that you're still there, you're still, and it's really good. So thank you again for all your brilliant work.
Thanks.
Okay, Adrian.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Amy, for a very good report. It was great to see that the partnership is working well, because I know there was a bit of resistance from colleagues to go down this path. But I felt for a long, long time, not just in this area, but other areas, we've given all the financial pressures on local authorities. We need to go down this model of partnership working. it not only saves costs, but I've found, looking at the others we do, one of the big advantages, not just the cost saving, but also by having the bigger teams, you've got more resilience in the teams and more expertise. And I think that's a fantastic thing to have. And it really is good to see the partnership work well. I've only got one slightly technical question. I noticed on the budget, there was a rollover of roll forward. So I just wondered how much that was and why we had a roll forward. And,
yep. Mariah, do you want to talk and then I'll come in?
Okay, so the roll forward was about 328,000. Medway's share of that will be around about 66,000 if it comes back to us. So when we know we're having for an underspend, it goes to the board. The board can either decide to return that funding to the local authorities or carry it forward into next year. That decision is normally made at the September panel, board decision. What I would say is actually we are seeing huge pressure on one of our areas, particular spending, that might not mean some of that underspend will be coming back this year like it has in previous years, but we are keeping a watching brief on that.
very good answer and a good reason.
Thank you. Leah?
So one was just, mostly I was just intrigued. There's like quite a drop in the amount of children being adopted from 2015 to now. It looks from all the other ones, it looks like that's a national thing, but I just wondered if there was a reason. And then the other one that was specific to here was the learning, development and support. Are they mandatory at the point when someone, like all the courses and things, are they mandatory at the point when someone applies to be an adopter? Or are they, if someone is facing an issue, these are the things that they can access? Thanks.
Okay, so in regards to the data, so yes, 2015 there was a higher level of placement orders, and actually what we're seeing nationally is because of special guardianship orders, really the drive to do everything we can to keep children with their families, that has reduced the number of adoptions. But you'll see over the last sort of 4 years it's sort of remained pretty consistent, and that's again a national picture. In regards to learning and development, so our applicants, when they're being assessed to become adopters, they have to attend our training that we put on for them. And then once they become a family and they have children placed with them, we provide as much training and workshops as we can, and that is very much down to their choice whether they want to attend. We're really trying to develop a culture within our community that to support our adopters to understand actually that we need them to be really special parents, sort of another sort of level around therapeutic parenting. So we want to try and encourage them to attend the workshops. But obviously once a parent becomes a legal adopted parent to a child, it's down to them how much they want to engage with our service or not.
And just those ones that are listed, there's like 5, I've lost the page now, but there's like 5 or 6 that are under that thing. How many, is that, are they the ones that are mandatory? Because there's about 16, 18 weeks worth. Is that, let me see if I can find it again.
Sorry, which page are you? So for the adopter assessments, it's 3 days that they attend in stage 1 and then 2 days in stage 2. And then we put on an additional day for early permanence and an additional day for siblings.
Okay, then, yeah. So the ones that I was looking at are the optional ones then?
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. You spoke about your aspirations for check-ins before they reach crisis point. Have you sort of considered having a community of adoptive parents that are doing good, so that it's like peer-to-peer approach? Because sometimes people think that social care, unfortunately, or social services as it was, is the sword of Damocles, isn't it? And if you kind of coach and mentor from the same perspective, i.e. adoptive parents together, that can be a real strength in problem solving and support.
Yes, absolutely. So we currently have just over 40 peer mentors, so they're our peer connectors, and they are sort of buddied up with our adopters once they're approved as adopters and provide peer support all the way through the approved to matching to placement stage. And then obviously if they build a good relationship, you know, there's nothing to stop them remaining connected. Our peer connectors are really dynamic and want to continue to develop and grow. So what they're now doing is they're looking at how they can develop more community groups. So we have around 5 community groups across the region and also 3 preschool groups. But the preschool groups are run by professionals. The community groups are purely run by our adopted parents. And so we're just about to launch, and I can send you the copy of the summer newsletter that went out yesterday that explains this, but we're just about to launch some coffee mornings that will be run purely by our adoptive parents. But what we're looking at is asking our adoption community if there's anybody else that wants to start up their group, then we will help support and we'll advertise it for them, but ultimately they run it. We had our adoption picnic about 3 weeks ago, and we had around 90 children and parents attend that, which was wonderful. And again, the theme, exactly what you said when I was speaking with the parents, was there's a real appetite for more connecting with other adopters. So that's really sort of what we're trying to focus on over the next 12 months.
Brilliant, thank you. And page 18182 talks about deregistration when things go wrong, but obviously that happens, doesn't it? And if they've had the training, do you start by trying to reinforce training, or maybe looking at child informed or ACEs or PACE, those kinds of strategies? Or when it goes wrong, is it that and done?
So is that for when those adopters that have been approved that then decide, actually that's their decision. We don't have adopters that we're saying we no longer want you to be approved. It's often families can sometimes be approved, and after looking for the right child, something may happen as a life event and they decide adoption isn't right for them anymore, or after considering different children, they come to their own conclusion that actually adoption's not right, but it's led by them, not by us.
Thank you. And then I've just got one more thing, if that's okay. Your report was fantastic, and I know Smitha works in partnership with you, and she says that you know, you do really good quality assurance and they're graded. So obviously we look at the outstanding. What do you do if things need improving?
So we do have a really clear process for quality assuring. In particular for us, it's obviously our prospective adopter reports. So they have to be quality assured by the team manager, and then they go to one of the panel advisors to check through. So it's quality assured by 2 senior workers before it reaches panel. I've had 1 prospective adopter report in the last 12 months, which I had to defer and not approve because I was concerned that there were things missing. So absolutely we will push back, but normally that wouldn't ever reach panel. So if there's any problems with that assessment, the social worker will work on it and then rebook, and that may mean then the assessment's out of time scales. And I'm clear that if the assessment's out of time scales, it will receive a requires improvement, and I think that's important. For that. So we're quite rigid with our approach to quality assuring and grading our work.
Brilliant, and thank you for all what you're doing for Medway, really challenging us to succeed and share success and expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the annual report as set out at Appendix 1, which outlines the activity that has taken place across the Adoption Partnership South East between April 23 and March 24.
Is that agreed? Seconded and agreed. Agreed? Thank you. Okay, so we're now on to 5C, which is the annual fostering report.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Pepenella, and I am the Head of Provider Services for Medway Children's Services. Under my portfolio, I oversee the fostering service. I trust everyone has had the chance to read the report. I would like to highlight that our primary objective remains to ensure that we recruit foster carers within Medway, because we want to make sure that our children receive the right care and they remain living within Medway. I would like to now open for questions in terms of the report, if there are any.
Absolutely. Questions?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the report. I want to turn your attention to paragraph 5.52 and then go to 5.42. It states quite clearly there's been a year-on-year net decrease with the number of foster carers, which is what you've just mentioned. And then at 5.42, you state that there were 3 large campaigns between April 23 and May 24. And I'm just wondering, from that, or those 3 major campaigns that were run, how many carers or foster carers came forwards from that?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat which points you were
Yes,
referring?
it was 5.52. It states recruitment activity. It's under the heading recruitment activity, and it says there's been a year-on-year net decrease in the number of mainstream fostering households, etc. But then, as I say, directly above that, at 5.42, it says during the period April 23, May 24, we ran 3 major campaigns that received promotion through a blend of PR, social media, and digital advertising. Well, what came of that? Because we're running 3 campaigns, major ones, and yet we're still getting a decrease. So I'm wondering if there's anything that we could possibly do to enhance that. I understand it's a difficult thing to do, but I'm just wondering if we can try and buck a trend.
Yes, so recruitment of foster carers has been difficult nationally, as we are aware, since the pandemic especially. And last year, out of the 366 initial inquiries, we had recruited 7 foster carers. However, this year I am excited to say that we have we are part of the Southeast Regional Recruitment Hub, which we have launched on 8th of July this year. And we are part, together with 20 other local authorities. So we have that going on at the moment. We also have the Mockingbird model, which we are on track for launching in October this year. And it is a model that will bring additional support for our carers. We will create a model where we will have a satellite care, and around it we will have 6-8 other foster households, which will provide the resilience for the children and the foster care, as well as create a family environment for the children. And we also have, we continue with our media recruitment. We have appointed as well to our vacancy in terms of our media recruitment officer as well. So we continue to promote fostering on various platforms.
No, thank you. I appreciate it is a tough call, and everyone who's been a foster carer, yeah, hats off to them. It is a tough job, but as I say, everything you're doing is commendable, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at 5.6.6, although there's been a decrease in deregistration from 39 down to 25, what is a concern when you look at Table 4 is the ones initiated by the actual foster carer. So in 2023, there was only 12. This year, there were 17. I'm just wondering what the theme is behind that. And just another question on that. The ones initiated by the fostering service, in 2024, we've got 0. Does that mean that all the hard work in 21, 22 and 23 to remove potentially unsuitable carers managed to purge the system completely, or due to the ever decreasing, are we potentially allowing people where previously we wouldn't? So just can we have to answer them questions, please?
Thank you. The reason why some of our foster carers have initiated deregistration was we have various reasons. So we had a few foster carers who resigned because they have changed their mind about fostering. We had a few foster carers who retired. Some resigned due to personal reasons. Others transferred to local authorities. And we had 3 foster carers that have resigned once their standards of care has been initiated as well. And in terms of the second question, we have had initially identified a few individuals where we thought that we will initiate deregistration. However, due to various circumstances to the individuals, these did not progress.
Okay, thank you. Leah.
So I had a very, very similar question to Mark for the first one, but I was really interested in the people that have transferred to an IFA, whether we're engaging with them, because obviously that's not personal reasons, they're still fostering. So are we talking to them about why they've chosen to move away from us? And then around the support groups that are offered for foster carers, and there's an expectation that all carers attend the support groups. What does that look like on the ground? If someone was to say, absolutely, that's not for me, that's not who I am as a person, does that then mean that they can't be a foster carer with us? And I had one other that I just need to find. Oh, it was just what is the family time service, which is mentioned in 5.21.
Thank you. In respect of the foster carers who decided to move on to remain foster carers for independent fostering agencies, they had various reasons for that. So some of them were interested in the package that was offered by the independent fostering agencies. Some of them were interested about the therapeutic support that they might receive from them. And we have had discussions with them to try and prevent them from moving from our services. The second question in respect of the support groups, no, we try and be very creative. So if prospective foster carers say that they cannot attend support groups, we try and see whether we can offer one-to-one groups or whether we can offer online sessions. So we try and identify what their needs are, specific needs are, and we tailor these to them. And in terms of the family time is our service that we provide for our children, usually that are in care, when they are removed from their parents. So they have sessions, they go and see their parents and their families in a safe environment, which is supervised by us. It used to be called previously the contact time, so we changed it to family time because we thought family time sounds more child-friendly.
Adrian, did you want to say something? Okay. Is it okay if I do then? Anybody else? Oh, sorry, Sharon.
Thanks, Joe. Mine will be really quick. I'm pleased to see the introduction of the Mockingbird. I think it's a really good idea. I've been talking to quite a few foster carers at the moment because obviously I was, like Leah said, I'm quite concerned, but I also understand as an ex-foster carer why people are going to private organisations. As you said, it's for the care package, and let's face it, it's for the the fees as well and the support. I just sort of want to feed back a little bit, if I can. It's a bit. Foster carers are. When you're in that home and it's in your home, you're 24/7. You do not get respite. So as much as, we can call on you from help and there's stuff, but there's stuff going on 24/7 and you're tired and sometimes the foster carers can feel a little bit under pressure when meetings are called at their houses and things like that. So I'm just feeding back, and also just to I don't know, to sort of make you aware. I don't want these people to go. I'm only saying this because I don't want these people to go. I want us to look after our Medway foster carers. I want to get more and more recruitment because, you know, going forward, that is the only way. And so I just wanted to do that, just to say that this was run. But I think the Mockingbird initiative is brilliant. So I hope that will help.
Thank you for the feedback. I am fully aware of the foster carers, how they feel and how they feel some of the pressure, and that we are committed in terms of reviewing what we can do more for them, what else we can put in place to make them feel supported. And we are also committed, of course, to reviewing their package as well, because we do acknowledge that that needs to be reviewed.
Thank you. I mean, I don't think it's you become a foster carer because you want to help and you want to love, and you know, you want to look after these children and empower these children. And I just think that sometimes the foster carers just want, it sounds really silly, but they just want a thank you, and I feel like they feel like they're not getting that as much as they should. So
thank you.
It's there.
Well, I want to come back, Sharon, because I was at 2 foster carers' houses and they, in Fostering Fortnight, got the best Marks and Spencer's orchids ever. I was well jealous. So as a thank you in Foster Carer Fortnight. But if I may, I just want to feed in from what we were talking about, or I was talking about with Amy, under 5.5.5. Initial home visits. So some of us staffed the stores in Foster Carer Fortnight, and there was some really wonderful foster carers of real strong character and expertise and skills, and really Tigger-like people. It was, you know, you kind of wanted to bottle them. And I just wondered about the dropout rates from initial home visits. And we talked about, you know, social services or social care rocking up, and, you know, it's like the darkest cloud or the sword of Damocles. Have you ever considered perhaps initial home visits being carried out by your own foster carers? So what would happen then, I feel, would a bit like, you know, you're hearing from the horse's mouth, so you're hearing from someone that's actually doing the job, and also immediately you hear it warts and all, and I think the statistics might change a little bit, because I think sometimes, I mean, social workers are amazing, but you do get a bad press, and you're kind of like a Miss Marple's busybody, nosy, you know, that kind of thing. But if it was just a wonderful foster carer rocking up who's been doing the job, it just might be an avenue in, because there is a national shortage, which leads me to my second question. It is a hard job, and Sharon touched on that. It's 24/7, but I think it's been exacerbated, especially over the last 14 years with the cost of living crisis. I know people that are really keen to foster. They don't have a spare bedroom. They've got no chance of getting a spare bedroom in the southeast. And, you know, we want our children to be local. Do you have any comment about that, please?
Thank you. In terms of the initial visits, having other foster carers joining them, we have to be very mindful of the fostering regulations. However, having said that, once we have initial foster carers who have been approved, what we do, we will match them with other foster carers. So we offer mentoring sessions, we have buddying system, and we do take into account the fact that it would be beneficial for them to be linked with more experienced foster carers. So we do promote that. In respect of the second question, we are aware of the issue in terms of the spare bedroom. I have recently met with colleagues from other departments to discuss in terms of Medway's plans of building new properties. So we have discussed about the importance of ensuring that properties meet the fostering regulations and that we have additional bedrooms for potential future foster carers.
Lovely, thank you. Leanne, you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair. we must remember that fostering and adoption are highly regulated, and they're highly regulated for a reason, because we need to safeguard already vulnerable children. So I think what we have tried to do in Medway is obviously stick to that regulation, but be as innovative as we can around that regulation. And we're going to be talking about the local plan later, and I've approached planning because in terms of our local planning going forward, what homes might look like, it would be very good if we could remember the fostering regulations so we actually get homes that will accommodate our children rather than 1 or 2 bedroom homes where there is no chance of our children remaining in Medway. So we need to think about the bigger picture as well. But please be assured, Chair, we are as innovative as the regulation allows.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, Vice Chair.
The committee notes that the Fostering Service annual report of 23 to 24.
Seconded? And agreed? Can I say thank you? And, you know, if you ever need any help in Fostering Fortnight, it was such a pleasure to be on that stall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving on to 5.D, which is the Regional Care Cooperation, RCC. James.
Thanks. So apologies for this being a bit of a last-minute addition. It's an area that's quite fast-moving and there's a lot that's been going on. It did successfully go through Cabinet on Tuesday night for approval. So I'm taking it that you've all read the paper, but overall it's a good news story. It's 2 parts. It's about Medway becoming part of a regional care cooperative with all of the other South East local authorities, that we can jointly try and tackle some of the challenges that we have around children's social care and sufficiency and homes and quality. We were only one of 2 pathfinder areas to be successful, which is really positive. And one of the reasons the South East was picked was the influence of London over the South East. So the South East, when we talk about the South East, is everybody around the south of London. And we know obviously some of the challenges that come with London boroughs and placing in regional authorities. The second part of that was that we had the opportunity to do a very quick bid to get some capital funding for projects that would benefit both Medway and the South East more generally. We put in a 2-fold bid. The first part was to renovate the All Even site. If those of you that remember that, it was our old short breaks provision which closed about 5 years ago. And the second part was to redevelop the cabin at Eden House, which could make that a 1-bedroom sort of solo addition to Eden House, allowing some of our more complex young people who maybe need a bit of time on their own to be able to kind of thrive away from the main building but still be supported by the quality staff. So that's the overall sort of picture. We've got just over £900,000 that we've been offered by the Regional Care Commission. Hopefully we can do the majority of those 2 projects with that amount of money, and it will mean that actually we can release some capital finance back into council funds, as well as being able to create a really positive new learning disabilities and autism children's home for our children. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Adrian.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, James. I think this is absolutely the right way to go. As I said earlier, you know, working with other authorities is the way forward, and particularly with the case of trying to find places for children, we need to grow that market because we are spending far too much on placements, particularly for some of our more challenged young people. And also, I think it's terrible that we've had to send so many children out of Medway, you know, so they can get the provision that they need for their particular circumstances. So I wholeheartedly support this. I really do welcome it indeed. And I'm glad, because I was put under a lot of pressure a little while back to sell all even, and I resisted it. And I'm glad now a good use has come for it, so I feel really chuffed of standing up to keep it was the right idea. The only thing that worries me a little bit now, it took so long to get the Eden House project up and running. Really, to be brutally honest, it was an unacceptable length of time. And in other projects, we've, particularly when there's building works involved, we've had a project board, which is mainly made up of officers, but then with the portfolio holder on that project board. And I would like to suggest that is done with this. It worked very well with some of the big projects. I sat on the one that did the new archives. I sat on the one that provided the refurbishment and new equipment for the crematorium. And we also had another project board I sat on for the new depot in the Rochester Maidstone Road. All of those, I think, projects move better because having regular project board meetings meant that people kept focused about it. So that's just a suggestion that perhaps officers could, members could take away. But to go back from where I started, yes, very much welcome. This is the right path. We need to do more of this, and I, look forward to other projects coming forward as well.
I mean, I'm sure you know the history that the old vicarage we called in as a Labour and Co-Operative group because we knew once we'd lost it as a children's home, but not just the old vicarage, the expertise, the outstanding staff, we're inadequate and we closed down an outstanding children's home. It's going to take time to get it back off the ground. And, at that stage, Liz Turpin was a Conservative, and she joined us in our dismay, confusion, and the tragedy for the children of Medway who get shipped up to Northamptonshire or further. So thank you, if for saying that it needs to be getting off the ground. But we're on post-COVID, we're in a very different economic climate for qualified calibre of staff, and we lost an outstanding team. And I know that because I worked with them to place a very difficult child who was going to be going to a secure unit, but then came to me. And not only did he come to me and thrive, but they delivered such impressive aftercare. And that person is now running greengrocer shops in Hastings. So he's been a real success story when it could have been a very different situation. And I learnt so much from those outstanding experts at Vicarage, the old vicarage, let me tell you.
Sure.
Mark.
I could just come back on that. Because one of the things I did write down, but I didn't say also, James, is there a budget for staff training and development in this package as well? Because following what Joe said, training suitable staff and developing them is critical to get these things operating well. So.
Yeah, no, the grant is only a capital-only budget, and I take your point about how long it takes to get a children's home up and running. This grant is, we have to have spades in the ground by the end of March. Yeah. So we're going to have to work together as a council to move past some of those sort of procurement bits. And I think, I've absolutely got support of people that I've spoken to so far that we can expedite it. It is going to be a significant bill. Those of you that have been past or even, it's in some state, which is why we're talking several £100,000 to do that. Then we have to recruit a staff team and those sorts of things. There is a financial model for, or even like we did with Eden House, where we know how much it'll cost to staff and equip and all of those sorts of things. Most of the equipment will be included in the budget, so hydrotherapy pools, lifts, all of those sorts of things. But the staffing clearly will be separate to that. And just to reassure the chair as well. We've got a number of the people that were in the original old vicarage that are still working with us as part of the new team that we've got up and running. So we've still got that muscle memory and the legacy of people that wanted to come back and get on board. So we are hoping we get back to those outstanding days.
Thank you. That is
Thanks,
music
James.
to my ears. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Reading the report looks really, really good. I think you might have covered one of my queries, which was when I looked at 2.2, it said we got 912,872, which is being used for alt-even, and then we're in the red 7.2. It said the same amount of funding for Eden House, but from my understanding of what you just said is the funding, that's the total funding, but it's being used on both projects. So that clarified that. With regards to Eden House and alt-even, you say with this funding we've got our spades in the ground by March. Just wondered what is the timescale for both of these projects? When are these buildings going to be available for the authority to use to make sure that our children are staying in Medway and not going to Northamptonshire?
Absolutely. So we're running pretty fast on this. We only got offered the finances in the last month. So we've got to go to a procurement board in the next couple of weeks. That will give us the approval to actually go out and secure a builder and go through that process. I think until we get to that point, I wouldn't necessarily want to give you an exact time frame on that. We all know what the building market's like at the moment. We might get somebody that would want to prioritise this and we might move quite quickly. It's hard to tell. I would fully expect that it would take a good 2 years to get children into alt-even, if I'm absolutely honest. By the time we've done the building work, recruited the staff team, gone through the Ofsted registration process, that would be a realistic time frame, but we are going to be slightly dependent on the building market and as to who comes forward and their time frames in what they can deliver. And clearly we have to go through that process of getting good value for money, getting good quality builders, but also that people that can do it in a timely manner as well, which is a bit of a magic trick sometimes.
Really, really good to hear that, and I can understand the reason you don't really want to put a total timescale on it. Would it be possible that, so March spades have got to be in the ground, if we could maybe to the committee just have an update of how things are going after March?
I'm absolutely happy with that, yeah.
Thank you. Douglas.
Okay, thank you, James. I too find this addition very welcoming, much needed. It's like a drop in the ocean, you know, but a very welcome drop in the ocean. We know we're sitting on the precipice of a big, big issue with children being sent outside of borough. Just last week, I was involved in the care of somebody going to Manchester, and I've seen firsthand how horrific it is to the family members in that process. So it's needed. My question is to 3.3 when we are talking about that this is in line with Medway's sufficiency strategy, and our ambition is to develop a suite of internal residential provisions. What do you consider a suite? 1, 2, what have you got any numbers to clearly define there? And the second one, sorry, just to add, just the second one, to build upon that is this whole question of economies of scale in your build. How are you measuring a successful unit? Is it based upon being able to reduce all the costs to a minimum? Because these are ventures that are very costly. If you're looking to have economies of scale based upon the least investment in those units to make them sustainable, we just want to safeguard that these 2 units in the future will not be closed down because they're too expensive to run. These are very expensive services, so that needs to be captured on the offset, that it's not about reducing costs as such. We want excellent services for our young people.
Thanks. That really valid question. So with regards to a suite, we've got Parklands up and running, which Andrada sort of mentioned earlier. Eden House, we're just waiting for Ofsted to come in and do their inspection, and we should be up and running there. So alt-even will be the third part of that. So there'd be a minimum of 3 provisions run by the council. Clearly, moving forward, we would sort of want to do this in a staged process. There might be proposals over the next 12 months where we put forward to Cabinet Council saying, actually, should we do something else, should we do something different? But it will come through that process. So it will be a minimum of 3 for the council, which would mean there would be up to 12 young people that could be housed full-time with us, and then up to 7 on a sort of part-time basis with a short break. So that gives us a suite. The advantages of that, as you say, are around sharing resources between our own provision. So staff will all be trained to the same standards. We can have a shared responsible individual. You know, if we do lose staff, then we can use staff across the piece and move them. Alongside that, one of the other things that we've done, which again was some grant funding we got earlier in the year, is we're about to launch our residential apprenticeship programme. So we know, speaking to a lot of our care experienced young people, they're very keen to come back into the sector and help young people like themselves, but there isn't necessarily a pathway for them to come and do that. So we've got some funding, as I say, from the DfE to do that. We've done some fantastic videos which are due to come online that we did in conjunction with the National Children's Home Association, and we'll have up to 10 apprenticeships that sit within the council that will learn to do their level 3 qualifications that need to work in residential, but will also get on the job, as it were, experience going in, doing shifts at Parklands, at Eden House, all of those sorts of things. So we are going back, and I think we mentioned it before, about that growing your own thing, about how can we utilise the young people that want to come back in and help and build that. And again, they'll do sort of time in Parklands, time in Eden House, and they'll decide which, because they're quite different natures of work, but they'll go, actually, I really like working with children with really complex disabilities, or I'd really like to work with children with sort of emotional and behavioural needs, and actually they can experience both of those things. Sustainability, we have been working with our sort of facilities, and we're looking at all of the sort of environmentally friendly things. Are there any existing grants that we can access around, you know, getting, I'm looking at colleagues over there, heat-based water pumps and solar panels and electric charging panels and all of these sorts of things. So we will be trying to do that on all of our builds as well to make it more sustainable. And I think, building on what we've said before, this is about the council making itself an employer of choice. And that's what we want to do off the back of getting the good inspection, off the back of all the good work that you hear about here. We need to somehow translate that into the other workforce, who often don't get a great deal in independent providers that might be a bit more focused on money than care for their staff, or all of those sorts of things. And I think, as we've seen, if we can pull 1 or 2 in, other people will come in and they'll want to work for us. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, it does. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Could I bring in the financial office?
And in terms of comparing ourselves for the in-house against external, I work with James's team fairly regularly, and we are consistently monitoring the cost of our prices and our packages, minimum, maximum and averages, and then comparing them to what they would cost in-house. So that is something we now do as a routine to check we get these comparisons, which is why James was able to put together this bid fairly quickly, because we'd already had some of the pre-existing information.
Thank you very much.
Leah.
So this was more of a question on RCCs themselves.
Yep.
Was I understood from this that we'd get greater negotiating power from it and things, but I wondered who then decides where that funding sits. So, okay, we've won now, and there's some funding coming for Orteven and the name that is escaping me. But then we have that in the future. Is there a chance that we might have something else that we really need, but it goes to a different authority?
Yeah, I mean, Leanne's been involved in a lot of the governance stuff, and I think it's still early days, because I think the general election has sort of put off a lot of those discussions. So it's just starting to form as to how all those local authorities can have a part, and as you say, about that governance around everybody getting some kind of fair deal. I think from our perspective, if we've got the ideas and we've got the data to back it up, we're in a good position. That would be my feeling. We do need to make sure that we are at the table to influence some of those decisions, because we've got a lot of good things that, you know, I know colleagues from Children's Social Care really want to progress and do. So I think, yeah, that would be my expectancy, that we would make sure that we get seats at the table, but also make sure that we've got good ideas and data to back that up. So if opportunities like this come up again, we can put something forward which is already sort of partially formed, as it were.
I'll just
Leanne.
come in there, Chair. I mean, it is too early to say, but we do have other examples of how coming together with a region actually works for Medway, and we were pretty quick off the blocks for this one. And as James said, getting that seat at the table, being an active participant, delivering on what we need to, should set us in good stead.
Thank you. Barry? Welcome back, Barry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification regarding the closure of the old vicarage. About 4.5 years ago in this at a meeting, and Dr. Farrick's predecessor introduced the report, provided information on feedback from a public consultation in relation to the proposed closure of the old vicarage. He confirmed that plans were in place for the young people currently residing at the old vicarage who would be transitioning in any event as they were approaching adulthood. He explained that in recent years it had become increasingly difficult to place or sustain placements of young people in the old vicarage as it's not able to meet the needs of increasing numbers of young people with complex needs. It was therefore considered most appropriate for the Council to use the opportunity to reinvest the resource in a way to support more young people, and in particular in edge of care arrangements to help support children and their families, which in turn would result in fewer children coming into care. Now, in addition to that, the interim assistant director explained that she had much experience in residential care, and it was possible for a residential home to receive an outstanding Ofsted judgment with no residents in the home, particularly as in such scenarios, provision was not measured on its ability to work with children with challenging behaviour or complex needs. The old vicarage was rated outstanding, but in a context where the most vulnerable children with complex needs were not having their needs met because the provision in its current form was unable to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. But we had the community backing us for it to stay, and actually it hasn't worked. And what happened in between times I won't go into, but it was shocking. Could I make a point, please? Leanne, I might be barking up the wrong tree, and James, but do forgive me. Obviously, when we have these places, and I'm really pleased that we're going to have two, because I just think, you know, being neurodiverse myself, you know, to be sort of, you know, like a parcel and packaged up and going off to Manchester when you might have a sibling here or a kinship, you know, family here. So that's really great. But in terms of us being more child-friendly Medway and working in partnership, would it be possible if perhaps we could link up, councillors link up to the provisions so that we get to know the children and the young people there, and that, you know, a bit like that we do at the children's hubs. I know it's different, but just so that we're, you know, that we're knowing what experience our children are getting.
I think anything's possible, Chair, but we must remember that these children and their futures are driven by their care plans. So it would need to be on a case-by-case basis, and it might work, it might be possible for some, it probably wouldn't be for others. But the care plan is how we support our most vulnerable children in our care to do well and get the best chance in life. Of course, we are all corporate parents, so there are possibilities, but it'll have to be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. And the final thing is that obviously when we place children elsewhere, it becomes very difficult because you know, if you want housing and you're up in Manchester, it then, you know, there's a real, and I know Kelly, you've helped me recently with Bexley. There's a real discrepancy as who's responsible, and then you might have been up in Manchester for 8 years, and suddenly, I'm not saying you're evicted back to Medway, but it actually, you lose all that knowledge of Manchester, and you're back to where you might not have anybody and starting afresh, which has got to be trauma after trauma, hasn't it?
So I think that goes to James's point about having a suite of our own residential facilities so that we can keep our children in Medway, and it's also working to their care plan, ensuring that we're meeting the needs of all of our children.
Thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Jo. I think you're definitely right with that comment. I just really wanted to say that, we're really pleased that Alt Even's hopefully potentially being redeveloped and improved. I have to say I'm a bit concerned about how length of time it'll take. I appreciate that what we need, but, I think there's a lot that we need now, and that is my biggest concern. I've raised concerns already regarding the length of short break waits for assessments. But I'm pleased to see in there that carers will be consulted as well, because I think that's really important to make sure that it's actually what parents and carers need, and also the young people. So I think we need to remember that young people's voice needs to come into that. Really good to hear about the apprenticeships. I do think we maybe need to think about the reality of some of those young people being able to access those apprenticeships. We've got many children and young people who can't reach a level 3 apprenticeship, so actually is there any chance of supporting those and having supported apprenticeships in there?
Yeah, supported apprenticeships is certainly something that we've been looking at about how we do that, and also we've been doing quite a lot of work to look at some of the blockers that might be for young people coming to work with us. We know, for example, a recent example is it put one young person who was care experienced off coming for a job because we were asking for a copy of their birth certificate and they didn't have it. Now that should not be a blocker, but we need to learn from those things and make sure that whatever we put in place, we can do that. Again, coming back to what Leanne said, the regulation is quite strict, so we would need them all to have a level 3. But if we need to add that additional support or do a supported apprenticeship, then I think we should absolutely aim to do that, even if it takes those young people a little bit longer to be able to do it. I do understand everybody's concerns about the time frames. I've got to be realistic about how long it takes for these things to happen, though. That, I wouldn't want to sit here in front of you all and say, actually, we're going to get it up and running in 6 months, because it's just not going to be reasonable. But we will work as hard as we can to get it up and running as quickly as possible. And certainly the interiors, for regards to, or even we absolutely welcome young people, parents and carers to come and talk to us about what that might look like. I think we probably need to do a bit of the work on the building to make it safe before we get people in there, because if not, everybody's going to be coming in hard hats. But we've got things like design, so we will be looking at doing workshops around, okay, what are these bedrooms like? What does a therapy room look like? What does the kitchen look like? All of those sorts of things, because we have got that in our gift to design at the moment.
Vice Chair.
Can I check, Adrian, was your suggestion earlier about portfolio holders, was that a suggestion for the committee or just something that you wanted the officers to know?
I would like to put it forward as a suggestion from the meeting, please, Leah, because I've seen it work well in the past, and we've got a very good, in the capital projects team, we've got some very good people there who can deliver, but it just helps concentrate people's minds, and having that member input from a portfolio holder, or indeed you Chair, would, I think, just keep everything focused. Because these are, as James has said, these are very complex projects. It's not going to happen overnight, but yes, I'd like that to go forward to suggestion, please.
And did you mean the property portfolio holder or the children's?
Children's, I think, more than the property. I think we've got a very good property team, but it would ideally both portfolio holders, both property and children's. But so it has worked well in the past, so it's just a suggestion.
So then, do we then I don't know how this process bit works, but do we then vote on that as a thing and then I move the second bit?
If you feel that there needs to be a vote, then there can be a vote. It all depends on
Well, I was just
whether or not it be something that you'd agree, if it was something that you wanted to agree on without there being a vote. But if you feel there needs to be a vote, then it's really entirely up to you.
just a general sense of agreement. Yeah.
Is there any disconsent?
Yeah, that was better.
No. That sounds like a reasonable idea.
Then, in that case, the committee notes the involvement, implications and aims of being part of the South East RCC Pathfinder project. Committee notes the external investment into the Even project, which is to develop a specialist 5-bedroom home for young people with learning disabilities and autism and neurodiversity, and to suggest that the portfolio holder for property and children's sits on those boards. Oh, and
a progress
the committee
report.
will receive a progress report of a 6-month update.
Okay, is that seconded? Agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Oh. Of course, absolutely. A 2-minute I welcome the lovely Catherine, and we're looking at the local plan, item 6 on the agenda.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us along to the committee to talk about what is an incredibly important issue for Medway. We're here to give you an overview of our most recent consultation in respect of developing a new local plan for Medway. Local plans always have a big focus on housing numbers, as well as ours, but it's also about the broader things that the local plan can inform. So that's jobs along with education and skills. It's about infrastructure and how we move people around Medway, but create new ways of travelling via walking, cycling, public transport, as well as the car. It's also about communities, the facilities that they need, and how people can live healthily and happily in their communities over the long term. So Catherine's going to take you through a short presentation, and then we'll move into questions, if that's okay.
Yes, sorry, Mark, I didn't introduce you. Welcome.
Lovely. Could I have the next slide, please, Chloe? Lovely, thanks. So just a quick overview to remind you that we took the local plan to Cabinet on the 9th of July. We're now out to consultation. That consultation runs through to the 8th of September. We've already started going out to speak to people in public exhibitions. Took a little pause this week because Dave's on holiday, Chief Planning Officer. Start again next week, but we're seeing a good response on the ground from people. And just, I'm aware that a number of members have already received a presentation. I want to reassure you this is not the same length this evening, but just to make you aware that the plan, as Mark said, does tend to be dominated by the maps and by housing. It is about much more. And there's really two main aspects to this consultation. One is around growth options, which is largely looking at maps, but the second aspect, which actually takes up more space and bandwidth in the document, which is quite chunky, is around policies. And many of those policies are for people and being able to influence some of the issues that we've been discussing here this evening. Next slide, please. So just to remind you, the plan is for sustainable development in Medway. It's seeking to achieve those aspects that Mark's outlined around doing better for the environment, for our communities, for the economy, and to ensure that in bringing forward growth, we can deliver quality growth that's fit for the future and delivers the quality that we expect to see in Medway. And I think if you had to sum up planning, most people think it's maps with colours on them for different land uses. It's actually about trying to address the issues that we currently face, understanding your place, the issues, realising the opportunities, opening up those opportunities for people across the area and trying to achieve that through managing change, being able to influence the change. That's what we can do. It cannot do everything by itself. It is not a magic wand, but by pulling in the same direction as other strategies and partnerships, that's where we hope to make some impact. So just moving on to the next slide. Thank you. So it is a plan for children and young people. It's not just for our usual residents that write in and tell us what they think about housing anywhere near them. This is looking forward to 2041. It's looking at the sort of place we want Medway to be and some of those aspects that are going to really impact on children and young people's lives now, but also their opportunities into the future. So it is looking at housing. So we've had some discussions already this evening about the mix of housing we need to see reflected in our communities. It's doing a lot for health, about trying to address health inequalities and improving well-being. Some of those are things like just actually better qualities of housing, so people aren't living in damp and overcrowded conditions. It's around the facilities and services available for people on the doorstep, whether that's open space, the parks, the facilities there that are inclusive and recognise the interests of young people. And it's things like the community and cultural facilities that are available to people and things like air quality. So if young people and children are walking around the area, they're actually living in areas that are healthy for them. It is around supporting learning and skills development and pulling that through into job opportunities so people can see opportunities to stay in Medway and develop successful careers. As Mark said, it's extending the transport choice, making it safer and more attractive to walk and cycle, and supporting and improving local services, which can include a range of outreach activities for young people. And this point about being fit for the future, looking forward, what do we want to see Medway be in the future, and making sure that we can do our bit to help provide the best opportunities for our residents. Thank you. So getting on to the mapping bit. Just move into the next one, please. Thanks, Chloe. So a big part of the plan is about mapping out where we think change could happen and what sort of tools we want to manage that change and where the opportunities are and the choices we've got to make. It's not easy. We've got a high level of housing needs and we have a number of constraints in Medway, whether they're environmental aspects or traffic congestion, flood risk, lots of different things impact on the area. I want to reassure people that we are looking at brownfield first. That fits in very clearly with a government agenda. It's been a principle in planning for some time, but that has obviously been restated by the current government. Everything's in the mix. Again, I think looking at what the government are saying in the last few days about planning and about investing in growth, many of the themes are already reflected in our emerging plan, and we're looking at scale where we can build bigger sites, where we can get facilities such as schools, health services and parks on site in the same location. So we're looking broadly at 3 options for growth across Medway, and we have identified an indicative preferred strategy at this stage. So you could just move to the next slide, please, Chloe. So the first one is around urban regeneration, looking to see what we can achieve by driving up densities, focusing the majority of our growth within those urban areas. That gives us some opportunities to bring investment into those centres, but it also raises questions around the quality of the living environment. To what extent are we driven by housing numbers rather than thinking about the placemaking for those communities around the residential areas, and is that the right sort of mix, particularly when we know we have a very diverse range of housing needs to meet, including families, and thinking about a very narrow type of housing delivery may not give us all the solutions that we need. So the next slide looks at dispersing the growth much more broadly across Medway, looking at the rural and suburban areas delivering more of that growth. That would give us a wider choice in terms of the areas available for development, but potentially there's some distance from services, reliance on cars, which could lead to inequalities and poor environmental conditions. And the third option is looking at bringing together aspects of both of those, where we're still seeing a focus on the urban regeneration, driving investment in our urban centres, but looking at providing for some of the growth in the suburban and the rural areas, to provide for a mix of housing, and where we would have more space to provide new parks, schools and transport connections as well. So we're consulting on those 3 options and looking forward to hear what people have to say about those. And then just moving on to the last slide, please. Just a reminder, the consultation closes on the 8th of September. We are getting some comments in already. We are continuing to do some work on the evidence base. We will be working up further refinements in the policies, but we will be taking account of the consultation comments. Although we've published a lot of information, it doesn't mean job's done. There's still a lot more to do. So we really want to get the message across to people. This is a legitimate consultation. Please get involved. There are lots of areas in the plan where that finer degree of detail and perspectives coming from different sectors in the community can really help shape the detail in the next iteration of the plan. So we're looking to finalise our preferred version of the plan early next year. Then we submit it to the Planning Inspectorate for independent examination. That's probably a year and a half, but looking to get the plan in place by late 2026.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'll open it up to questions. Okay. Pardon? Yeah, Wayne. Wayne, please.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this report. I accept that it's a consultation document and there's a considerable amount of work already gone into that. Mark, Catherine, Dave Harris in particular have done an awful lot of work into this. Looking at the paper that was put in with our agenda under item 6, I read with interest at paragraph 3.3 that the local plan has an important part in promoting the interests of our children and young people. Set aside for the moment the delivery of affordable housing, which is also contained at 6.3 in the plan, the desire to boost the economy despite the current administration's desire to close down the docks and the business park at Rochester, And as I mentioned at council, the negative impact of the red routes and the increased parking charges.
Wayne, would you use your mic?
About.
We can't hear you for the minutes. Could you use your microphone, please?
My microphone is on. Oh, okay, I'll start again. I'm quite happy to do that. So I say I read with interest paragraph 3.3, the importance that this report is having with regards to promoting the interests of children and young people. Set aside for this moment the delivery of the affordable housing at 6.3 within the local plan, the desire to boost the economy despite the administration's wish to close down the docks and the business park at Rochester, and as I mentioned at the last council meeting, the impact of red routes and the parking charges, particularly in my constituency of Rainham North. I want to actually look at paragraph 3.5 and the ambitions for the healthier Medway, because I do really think that this is a very key part to our plan, and particularly for the development of our children, which over the previous meetings we've had, we've talked about obesity, etc. And so a healthier Medway is really important. Now, unfortunately, at present, my constituents are worried about increased charges, for example, at the Coslington Park Sports Centre, which some people are finding unaffordable to attend. And in addition to that, I've had constituents already contact me saying that they are finding it difficult to book. They can't just turn up on the day, apparently, and go swimming, which I find. So when we're considering a plan and looking at possible new venues, can that be something that you would consider looking at? I'd also ask and inquire whether or not within the consultation there'll be any Section 202 monies available to fund other community centres and activities that can be done for our young people. And will you ensure that any activities and centres are then created and affordable for families and young people? I personally don't want to fear that the youngsters and families may miss out on those opportunities of having developments running at costs which they can ill afford. You also mentioned about the schools. Whenever I see plans with regards to schools, they only ever deal with primary schools. This local authority seriously needs some secondary school places. So I would actively encourage you to consider, I know we've got one just opening in September, but a further school, because I think that our children are going to be suffering by having to travel across the borough in order to attain their secondary school. And then the final point, and I acknowledge that the consultation runs until the 8th of September, and it states that, and within the report it also states that you want to reach out to those who often engage, who don't often engage with consultations. Now, given the lack of faith, particularly from my constituents, when their comments with regards to the red routes were completely disregarded, or so they feel, how are you going to persuade constituents to actually respond, and more importantly, that their responses are going to be catered for and listened to?
I'm sorry the red routes aren't the blue routes, but you actually put them in place. Well, not you personally, but your administration. We just had
I think you'll find that was not the point. You are so wrong with that.
Thank you, Councillor. I think there are a number of things in there that sounded like questions. Some of them were just points which we won't address. I'll address the point on the charging for Coslington Park. It's not strictly within the remit of this committee, but if the chair will indulge me, the council subsidises our existing leisure offering by about £1 million a year, and that increased in the setting of the budget this year. I think it's fair to say that the reality of us, trying to generate increased revenue for our sports centres and our leisure offer is very much in the interest of trying to keep them open and as going concerns for the local authority. I appreciate charges, additional charges would not have been, welcomed by residents. I do believe quite strongly that, everyone should access from Medway's leisure offer, which is why we've looked at specific sessions at Consultation Park that are discounted. There are obviously benefits to things like taking out memberships that are cheaper per swim than the publicised single swim cost if you're just going there once and once only. But it is something we'll keep under review. Yeah, but that's probably all I can say on that for the moment. Oh, just on the booking. So the booking is just about safety numbers in the pool. So rather than have a lot of people that turn up and then disappointed because they can't go in, we have big inflatable sessions there that limits the amount of people we can get in. So we ask them to book so that we can just manage numbers and people don't have a poor experience standing outside waiting to get in. Essentially, that's the reason for booking.
I'll just come back on your references to community facilities and use of Section 106. So we will be doing further work on the infrastructure delivery plan, which will support the preferred spatial strategy so we understand the quantum of growth in different locations, the existing infrastructure base and what's needed. So that will be a more detailed piece of work that we're working on at the moment, but it'll be finalised for the next stage of the plan. So we're going to give you some reassurance on that. And then the review of the Section 106, the developer contribution policy will link through to the IDP. So we'll see that direct relationship between the services that are needed in particular locations as well as those that may be borough-wide. And picking up on your point in relation to secondary schools, because of the scale of development and the length of time that the plan's looking at, we do anticipate the need for new secondary schools as part of the planning, and we're working very closely with the schools planning team with regards to identifying the locations where those schools will be needed and also the phasing, so we can be looking at the phasing of development in different locations and when that's going to hit the trigger to get the secondary schools in place. So just to give you some reassurance, that's coming in the next stage.
No. Thankful for those comments. Thank you.
Can I go to Celia for about the schools, if that's okay?
It's all right. I think you covered it anyway. So we anticipate a new secondary school needed by 2028. We have been in contact with the DFE. There are no further free school processes in the pipeline. They don't know when the next one's coming. Ideally, we want to do it through that process because otherwise we have to pay for it. Even with our Section 106s and basic need, we are probably going to be short and we're going to have to then look at how we get the rest of the money. Conservatively, it's going to be a minimum of 40 million to put that school in. So we are aware it's a pressing need and we are pressing the authorities to see if we can get support funding.
Thank you, Celia.
Paula, please.
Thank you, Jo. My question is more about how we are engaging our children and young people in the consultation process itself. So whilst many of us are sitting here, 2041, our children will be adults then, and we want to ensure that Medway is a thriving place that is healthy, inspiring, motivational for them. So it's a really simple question. How and in what ways are we getting their views and perspectives on their plan into the consultation process, and very much emphasising that, from my experience, young people are concerned about climate change, they're concerned about having a sustainable future. So whilst we might squabble back and forth and try and score points against each other, we are actually putting together a local plan where we want to make sure that they're going to have a future and that it's a future here in Medway. So I guess the first one is, how are we engaging them? And to what extent are their views going to be part of this process? And the second one is, given that they have a huge vested interest in ensuring that our local plan is definitely sustainable and as focused on net zero as possible, what efforts are we doing around that as well?
Okay, just to come back to you on some specifics. So it is a mix, and as ever, it is shaped by resources as well. So it's never going to be perfect in terms of full reach. We're definitely working with partnerships and networks. So a number of people around the table have been helping us to get the information out to various groups. We also have some specific activities built into the consultation programme. So we will be going to the Youth Council at the end of August. We're making contact with the Mid-Kent College to go to some engagement with their students, and we're hoping to get some footfall with some of the other events that are running more widely across Medway to raise awareness. But I think we need to consider what we do as an ongoing issue rather than thinking, right, let's cram some things into this 8-week consultation period. So, for example, there'll be some targeted social media going out which will be directed towards younger people's audiences, so we can do some social media work there. But that's not great, and just in terms of, okay, we've ticked some boxes and got to a few people through the consultation. I think one of the things that we really need to invest in as part of the process of preparing the plan is those wider relationships that we continue through. Because it's not just about getting the getting the document done will be fantastic, I can tell you, but being able to feel this is part of a joined up plan for Medway, and we're working with colleagues so we can understand as the other service plans are updated, we're feeding that information in, and as we're working towards the delivery of the plan. Because plans constantly be reviewed as well. So I think we need to be thinking about those wider opportunities, that the plan's not seen as a place-based activity only, and it doesn't have the link in with people. So that's something we'd like to look at. And with regards to the environmental issues, yeah, it is something where we've got, again, some separate reach going into some of those sectoral networks around climate change, both through the council and through the wider community networks. And it is a key part of the plan. So the climate change policy is right up front in the document. The environmental chapter is where we start in the plan, because if we can't protect the place, it doesn't matter then what we try to do with the transport networks and the housing policies if they actually haven't got the land and the environment in a good position. So we're hoping that the plan will help us steer and meet some of the wider objectives the Council has with regards to addressing climate change and the things that we need to do differently. Looking forward to 2041, we can't keep doing what we're doing now, and making some of those setting the direction for helping people have wider choices about how they travel, for example. So the plan is promoting more opportunities for walking and cycling. I'm hearing lots of comments from people saying, well, it's not appropriate, you know, I can't cycle down that road. But we think, well, as areas grow and that infrastructure becomes better, it may not be a very attractive choice at the moment, but we can do things to improve that across different parts of Medway. So it's making sure that we don't lose out on those opportunities, that we future-proof how we develop across Medway.
Paula?
So I think this is probably more a question for Celia. To what extent have planning and education looked at how you can engage the schools, particularly the sixth forms, in being more proactive and being involved in the consultation itself, and then obviously further down the line as the process continues?
So the information has been shared with all the schools, and the work being done with Mid-Kent College to engage a group of young people through that mechanism. Child Friendly Medway are also doing some engagement work with our young people around this plan.
And the universities?
So we have gone to all partners. I can't tell you specifically now in terms of that, but we have gone to all partners with the consultation work.
And one more question. Do we know how they have, obviously you've sent it to the schools, but to Mid-Kent College and the universities, are you aware how they've disseminated that amongst their students?
So no, not at the moment, no.
I think the timing of the consultation of the summer period has been, it's compromised what we could do. But in previous consultations, we did visit universities. We have had good engagement from the universities and the colleges in terms of the administrations feeding comments back to us and representing their interests. We have done some work in the past with young people, at students at colleges, but obviously doing this during July and August is really poor in terms of timing. So I think this is the sort of thing we can maybe pick up in terms of ongoing work.
Leah?
So it follows on quite nicely from Paula's, because I had a wider question about how we're engaging with young people in the consultation process. But also, I find generally when we try and reach out, what we find is grammar schools engage with us really well, and they kind of just engage with the political process. The other schools, or the children within the other schools, tend not to. So I wondered how we can target that a little bit more and make sure that we're hearing everyone's voices across the board. And then to speak about some of the things around consultations and things, it's worth saying that constituents only feel that way about red routes as collectively you've run a campaign of misinformation as an election tactic. We're much more approachable, a much more approachable administration than the previous one. 84% of residents were against shore start closures, and I spoke to a full council as a resident to a group of men with no knowledge of what that service was and no willingness to listen, which is why I now sit here. So I would urge all residents to engage with that consultation process. As an administration, we do listen, and I would ask you guys to encourage residents to engage with that process, because otherwise, what's the point? And we have changed the culture of the council around listening to residents is entirely different to what it was 5 years ago.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the local plan to do with children, young people, the way the documents were given to us would basically give us the whole local plan, and then you've got to go through the whole local plan to find out which sections relate to children and young people. I know, hopefully, in my lifetime as a councillor, we won't be doing another local plan again, but maybe for 15 years' time when they're doing 2041s, it might be an idea to, if we're going to bring it to committees and it's looking at particular areas that committee does, that maybe we highlight them sections a bit better. With regards to our young people, this time of year, when you go around, you see a lot of young people in the small areas of green spaces we've got. And one of the things is that I looked on when you were showing all your options, and Rainham South West didn't have any shading on it, probably because it's like the only little bits we've got left are like small park sizes. But with regards to the green spaces, a lot of areas like that are not only used for our children and young people, but there's also a lot of our wildlife will use them. And tackling climate change, which even my daughter, and she doesn't get involved in a lot of things, but she's really interested in that. And one of the big things I remember all them years ago when I was a child is that trees are a big combat of climate control, and we need to be making sure that our green spaces with their trees are being protected more. And the other thing is I'm quite passionate about is sport, for youth sport. Currently being a manager against my wishes, but I enjoy the coaching that, is that with the growth in grassroots football for youth sides across Medway, we're seeing a massive influx of children getting involved, because it's quite an affordable way of them getting involved with other children and that. But the biggest thing a lot of them sports clubs at the grassroots level are finding is lack of space to play a football match, to play a rugby match. Probably the same for tennis and that. So I just wondered, is there a bit more focus on how we can support them and what is being done? Thank you.
Okay, just to say, we have updated our evidence base in relation to parks and open spaces, so that will, and that's been an audit of our existing provision, looking at what would be needed to meet future growth needs and locations, and that will set the new policy requirements for open spaces. We're also carrying out an audit in relation to sports provision, because obviously we don't want all the land just marked for housing, and then we've got no space left for schools, for health facilities and for sports facilities. So that all becomes part of sustainable development. When we talk about sustainable development, it's that balance between the environment, the economy and communities. And communities need homes, but they also need spaces to recreate in, places to meet people. So that will be a balance, particularly when we're looking at those areas which may involve larger development. We would expect those facilities to be provided as part of the wider growth in those locations.
Thank you. We're running out of time, guys, so what I'm suggesting is I've got a list of people, so I'm going to go for one question each, please. Thank you. Sharon, you're next.
I'll do this quickly. As corporate parents all sitting here, I really want to do the best for our children that are care experienced, and it fits in lovely tonight with the youth offenders and the fostering reports that we'd spoken about in a subcommittee that we could maybe start looking at training flats for people that are young people that are starting to come out of care, and it doesn't have to be anything really elaborate, but just somebody there to support them, to go through what it's like doing bills, and just to make sure that if they're feeling vulnerable, they have someone to talk to. It has worked well in other places, and I think we would then see, hopefully, we would then see maybe a decline in young offenders and people being targeted by people that we don't want them to be targeted for, and are becoming evicted for sort of no fault of their own, that they haven't had the training and the life experiences to go through. So is that something that we could look into?
So thank you for your question. That's very much, I think, about how we use the homes that are delivered through the local plan. I guess on that issue specifically, you know, we've got housing stock that is within council ownership. We've got good relationships with other registered providers across Medway. There's probably nothing now preventing us from looking at that type of option if it's something that we felt was needed. So probably some work for us to do as to how we fund it, make it work, that type of thing, who we use it for. But it's certainly a piece of work that can be picked up between the housing team and Kelly's team.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of something like more formal, that if a developer wants to come in and develop it, right, that we could add this in as part of the social housing, that it has to be there as a training flats. But yeah, brilliant.
Barry?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Just a couple of points and one question. Regarding the new leisure centre at Cossington Park, which I think is an excellent centre. I've used it myself, and I must say it wasn't particularly crowded. But it occurred to me that we've taken away the free swimming for children, and that's the only sport which has life-saving elements to it.
Excuse me, we're running out of time.
Okay.
What point are you making on the local plan?
Okay, the point I'm making is, with the consultation, can you guarantee to me that it won't be decided by which group shouts loudest? I'm particularly interested with regard to the Save Hugh Peninsula group, who seem to ignore the fact that they've been virtually unchanged for 100 years. The land to the south of Rochester, Chatham and Rainham has virtually been concreted over. And finally, on your plan...
Sorry, sir, it's one point.
This is important, actually. On your plan, you've got the circles representing the houses. In the details in that plan, do we have any idea of what numbers are involved?
Can I
Well,
ask how
23 years it took you to get a local plan and you didn't do it, apparently.
So I thought we were talking about children and young people and their relationship
Yeah.
to it, so just checking.
Yeah, just briefly, with regards to who shouts loudest, that won't pass a planning inspector. We've got to demonstrate that we meet the test of soundness and legal compliance when we get to independent examinations. So we need to demonstrate that the assessments and the choices that we make are based on evidence, which may also include views from the public, but we need to, it's not a case of the biggest campaign says this. We need to look at the grounds on the same basis as a planning application. It's around the the relative merit of the different planning of the planning balance. So that will drive the assessment and the decision making in the document. And in relation to the housing numbers, there is information which is indicatively provided in the land availability assessment, and outside the meeting I can send you a copy of that. But we deliberately didn't attach the numbers with the sites in this version of the consultation, because we want to engage people in thinking about how those areas are used. And the numbers could vary significantly depending on the amount of land that you feel is appropriate in certain locations to develop for housing, which parts of those sites may be needed for schools, for open space facilities, for employment. And at this part of the process where we haven't made those final decisions, it would be misleading to provide that. But there is an indicative allocation in terms of numbers in the land availability assessment, which was published last year.
Thank you, Catherine. Can I have George? One question, one point.
I'm not going to even make a point. I don't know. I think they've all been made. Just a quick question, Mark. Coming back to your point on the schools and the developer contributions, and the point that Celia made around the need for a new secondary school in 2028. I'm just interested in what strategic conversations we're having, and I guess this sort of straddles the regeneration team's role as well, but the strategic conversation and piece that we're having with some of those larger sites, particularly ones that are, several potentially going to be allocated within the local plan for several thousand units, and what conversations we're having specifically about children and young people's needs, because obviously recognising that those developers potentially could have sites allocated with significant numbers of residents, and therefore through the Section 106 agreement we could negotiate, or even through the local plan set policies with a view to be negotiating larger contributions, whether that be a secondary school or a primary school or sort of even wider than that for community assets. I'm just interested in terms of what conversations you've had with developers on that, because I know the leader of the council and the chief planning officer, even earlier this week, were talking about your sort of first developer meeting that you've had recently. So just interested in that, please. Thank you.
I appreciate the question was for Mark, but just to add, we're starting some of the discussions with those major developers now. We had that as part of the engagement earlier on last month now, but that level of detail will be critical to the site allocation policies in the next version of the plan. So those strategic scale sites, we will have much more detail when it gets to the final version, which will be indicating the mix of land uses that I've previously referenced, but also make it clear. So a bit like in the planning application with the conditions, it will indicate the mix of uses, the provision of facilities, the phasing, the timing of that. So it'll be very detailed. So it's very clear with regard to the requirements that site will need to deliver. That will help it to justify that it can deliver sustainable development. So that will be coming in that further part of the plan.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. So I think what part of our approach as a planning authority, something that Dave and Catherine and their respective teams kind of pick up really well, is just having a really positive and ongoing dialogue with developers, essentially. So particularly, where we have big strategic sites like Rochester Riverside and many of the allocations that you see through eventually through the local plan, is really engaging with developers and site promoters early on through that process, identifying really clearly what the council needs to see delivered. There is more work for us to do around engaging with local communities and what local communities want to see delivered on specific sites as well. We're trialling some of that out on the peninsula at the moment in terms of a community infrastructure framework, but it all hinges on making sure, one, that we've got a local plan that kind of sets a clear vision for Medway, and two, that we're engaging really, really early with developers and site promoters to make it really clear what our expectations are.
Thank you, Mark. Douglas?
Thank you. I won't use up much oxygen, in fact, talking about things not related to young people. But in today's digital age, there's a digital divide that we all know. So how are we ensuring that young people have access to technology and digital literacy programs to ensure that they can stay enabled, stay connected, stay engaged, and also have access to apps that will allow them to access mental health facilities and so many other provisions? It would be a shame to look at 2041 with the same issues that young people face today, no access to digital tools. So what sort of initiatives are you thinking about to ensure young people get access to affordable, free access to digital? Thank you.
So I think it's a really broad question. It probably strays across kind of some planning activity and potentially some education and probably some other parts of the council as well. I think essentially what we will try to do is get the infrastructure right. So from a connectivity perspective, is making sure there's good quality internet connections out into all areas of Medway. Community facilities is really important. So actually looking at where even where we have kind of urban areas now and where we'll see growth of homes in the future, is making sure that there are the right facilities, because actually libraries and community hubs are a really good resource for people who at any age to access, to get support with accessing essential services that are predominantly digital. So it's how we plan to deliver those types of services into those areas, how we make sure there's the right school provision to make sure people can pick those skills up from a really young age, and then the various programs that will go on through certainly through our economic development team and our skills team to provide kind of foundation level skills to people who haven't had access to that in the past, essentially.
Thank you. Adrian, 1 point, please.
Right, just a little bit of a long point, I'm afraid. Whilst I appreciate the huge amount of work that's doing this, and as Catherine's pointed out, there's a lot in the document that affects children and young people. But I feel we've missed an opportunity here. We have, on pages 9 and 10 of the document, we have 2 pages worth of policies. There's everything there from aviation to wastewater treatment. But there's nothing specifically about children. And I think we've lost the opportunity there, because we need to get that pulled together. In the executive summary, there's a passing reference to our ambition to be a child-friendly city, but that should be in bold in a policy. Leanne's mentioned tonight, we've got a shortage of homes that are suitable for fostering. We've talked about tonight, the need for care leaver accommodation, and that's something I feel passionately about as well. So I think, and yourself, Joe, planning, you've mentioned umpteen times that we need better provision for children to play in new developments. And I think we should have a policy amongst all that lot, which covers every letter of the alphabet. But we do need, I think we need some policy there that brings all those threads together. Because there's a lot of good stuff there. I'm not being critical, but I think we have missed the opportunity to have a sort of child-specific, a young person-specific policy. I think, and I'd like to know why we can't have one, please.
Are we happy to have that as a recommendation? Yeah, I think we are. Okay, Catherine, can I just say thank you, because you gave my foster children such a warm welcome, and I was really worried when I was at the Pentagon because it was like a ghost town, and then when I got into your presentation it was packed in there and it was just so lovely. And then I took, so that was for my foster son, and I took my daughter to the Who one. And, again, she got such a warm welcome, and I think they must have filled in 100 Post-it notes for you of what they want, But it's important for our children, and Medway's children do matter. So thank you for that point, and we're over to the Vice Chair.
So the committee is requested to provide feedback on the proposals in the Medway local plan consultation in relation to its impact on children and young people. The only one that I picked up, leaving aside all the points that we made, was that we include child-specific policies in future versions of the plan as it goes through the rest of the consultation. If I missed anything, then shout at me now. But
Probably child-friendly language as well, because a bit less wordy. Yeah. Can I say thank you, Mark and Catherine? You've been brilliant, and it's obviously a big debate and 23 years late, but we're here now. So, can we agree with the recommendations? Oh, sorry, yeah. So, seconded and agreed. Okay, thank you. Pass them. And item 7. We are now looking at the capital budget monitoring. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. So this report details the first round of capital budget monitoring. That was carried out during June. It's gone through DMT, CMT and through Cabinet a couple of days ago. So it's just worth remembering this is the first estimate of the year, so it's estimated spend for the current year and being capital future years as well. That will be refined as we go through the year and schemes obviously continue to progress. Section 5 of the report gives 2 tables and they detail the overall capital budget monitoring for the council and importantly the funding of that monitoring. It's probably important to say there that from a purely financial point of view, when you're looking at funding from grants and contributions and capital receipts is obviously much preferred to borrowing because borrowing will bring added costs to our revenue budget in future years, although it's not the only thing you should think of. Section 6 details by service all the different schemes and it gives a progress report for all those schemes. It also gives details of the overall outturn against the budget for that section and the funding of that. There are a few mentions in this report of potential need for future funding, and that will obviously the service will bring that back as time goes along and if that is required. There are, whilst overall for those schemes that report or are a responsibility of this committee, there isn't any overall variance from the budget. There are a couple of areas where we've got a potential overspend funded by an underspend. That is mentioned within the report and environment was requested for Cabinet for £500,000 and that was approved 2 days ago. I think there are other sections which detail changes from the budget, risk section, but I think that's enough from me and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just reading the report, notices there's not any under or overspend for children. I just go back to 5.1 and just ask a question because you got on table 1, you got total expenditure to 31st of 3rd, 24, but it's the title summary capital budget position 24-25. So I'm assuming that goes from April 24 round to March 25. And just on another one on 6.1, again on the charts, you've got total expenditure 31st of the 3rd, 23, with forecast spend 23-24. As this is a public document, I do that same mistake when I use cut and paste an old document, but if we're sending this out. So just would like to add is that from the information about Alteven and Eden House funding, I'm assuming that there's a bit more money that's going to be coming out because obviously we got from one line to a different line on that because we got the DFE grant of 900,000 plus. So I take it that'll be in on the next report. That's all. Thank you.
So to take your points there on table 5.1. The point is there are capital budgets which roll from year to year. So whilst we end up with a budget for the current year, it's a much bigger budget of which some may have been spent in a prior year. Hence why we have a total approved cost, what's been spent to the end of March, and therefore what the approved budget, remaining budget, new budget is for this year. Yes, in the table under 6.1, yes, that's a mistake. Apologies, it should have said 31st of March 24. And on the money for even where that's being diverted from is there's some basic need funding, so some capital grant funding that we're able to use for that. Is that the point you wanted to make?
I just say, because that funding's only just been given, I'm showing that the lines will then tally up. The capital budget will still be the same amount, but it'll be, I'm assuming that's going to now be, because it's now a DFE grant, instead of out of borrowing, it will just change lines.
The cabinet minutes that came out, obviously very, very recently, they show a series of recommendations, and yes, some of the money is being diverted to the replacement of Vote Even from the Children's Assessment Centre, but there was an element of that was borrowing, and where it's not required anymore, that will not remain unless a reason is brought forward that the council needs to use further borrowing, but that will be a separate issue that's brought forward. But the amount of borrowing, the money that is being diverted was grant monies that we were able to divert.
Thank you. Adrian?
Thanks, Joe. It's really good to see that there's so much in the capital budget for refurbishment of schools. In fact, it's a huge chunk of the budget. Andy, are we using refit funding for some of the energy of improving energy efficiencies of the school program? I know we have used it for our own buildings. We've used it for Gun Wharf, our sports centres, but I can't see any mention of it being done for schools. So, which would be a good thing to do because it would help reduce their budget pressures in the longer term, as well as covering some of it spreads across. And what you've done for efficiency also means you've got to replace windows and things, which is a win-win situation.
What I would say on that one is there are specific funding streams, and there, for example, you'll see a section in there for condition programme, and the service plans maintenance of schools using that, and obviously there are ad hoc works that occur throughout the year. That's a government grant that is given each year to assist schools. I'm not aware of anything in addition to that that's been made available, and I think the other schemes that are elsewhere within the council are using obviously different streams for that.
Outside of the, and with the capital projects team, because I know we've done it for our own buildings, it'd be good to use it for schools as well, that's all.
Okay. Wayne, sorry.
I'm sorry, Chair, I got too keen. I was using my phone and I'm on the next agenda item, sorry.
That's fine, thank you for apologising. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, sorry, George.
Sorry,
I'm blind in this side, don't you?
That's all right. I haven't got a question. I just needed to raise a point because I've just read the recommendations. The Greenacre Academy, which is now not the Greenacre Academy, is part of the Walderslade Greenacre Schools Partnership, which is run by the Beyond Schools Trust. I'm a member of the Beyond Schools Trust, so I've only just noticed this. So while we're not taking a decision, I just wanted to make note of that. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thanks for declaring. Okay, Vice Chair. Oh, sorry. Barry, you're awake.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Robbing Peter to pay Paul, sanitised by the term virulent, seems to be the flavour of the month. It's akin to robbing older people who can't afford the loss and paying younger people who probably can. I'm referring to the Victory Academy. Were the Victory Academy people content to lose £500,000 to merge basic needs project with their very essential provision for pupils, secondary pupils with special needs? If it is acceptable now, why wasn't this in the proposed earlier? And I'd also like to know, what did Greenacre do to mitigate the £500,000 overspend on the science block? It appears to me, and I'm sure it's going to appear to be to many other people, that this really is blatant discrimination for SEND pupils, which is not acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I pass that to Celia, please?
Thank you. So the projects that are planned to deliver and the delivery on the Victory site is also for SEND pupils. But the projects are delivered as planned. We haven't changed the projects. It just so happens that we were able to have more efficiencies on the Victory delivery, and the Greenacre one, the construction costs went up. We've seen quite significant variance in the construction costs as they come through. So from the point of where you plan to build something to what actually finally realises it. So this was on our budget that we allocated. We had that underspend in Victory and we had an overspend, so we just fired the money. But the projects haven't lost out on the provision that they were being offered. It wasn't a decision to take something away from one.
You're merging basic needs provisions with the provision for 25 to 30 secondary age SEMH pupils. So if it's acceptable now, why wasn't that done in the beginning at Victory Academy?
Sorry, can we have a bit more clarity on that? We're confused up the front.
Yeah, it says in paragraph... Oh, I've lost it now, hang on. It says in on page 240, the Victory Academy SEND block remaining budget, etc., project to provide resource provision for 25 to 30 secondary age social, emotional, mental health needs. And the project now underway is expected to complete this year. This work for the basic needs project at the school has now been combined with this SEND scheme, which will deliver significant savings. That's on page 2, bottom of page 240 and top of page 241. If it's okay to combine now to get somebody else out of a hole, why wasn't it okay beforehand?
So, yeah, that's combining work we were doing on the basic need and the SRP, which had the money for the SRP came in as part of the safety valve work. So I'm not sure what your question, I wasn't aware we weren't doing it before. It was just about efficiencies of doing both pieces of work together. I can't, you've not got your...
Gosh, yeah. It implies that the £500,000 saving at the Victory Academy was the result of merging the basic need project with the SEMH project. And I'm just saying, if it was okay to do that now, which helps out with Greenacre, why wasn't it in the original planning originally?
Can we have some clarity from the finance business manager?
Can't hear you.
Sorry.
No. Okay, so generally what we do, when we go out to commission these capital projects, we go out as single individual projects. However, sometimes we combine the projects with 2 or 3 projects together and go out and commission them as one. That allows us to generate cost efficiencies. So the work and the project and the work involved in each individual scheme is the same, but actually one provider is doing 3 projects, which drives the cost efficiencies.
Okay.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the results of the first round of capital budget monitoring for 24-25, and the committee notes that Cabinet of 31st of July 24 were asked to approve a revirement of 500,000 from the projected underspend on the scheme at Victory Academy to the Greenacre Academy scheme to cover a projected overspend on that scheme.
Is that seconded? Thank you, Paula. And agreed? Thank you, and thank you, Andy. Now we're on item 8, and it's the revenue budget monitoring round. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. So this report summarises the round 1 revenue budget monitoring for 24-25 and was presented to Cabinet earlier this week, having been considered by the Directorate Management Teams and CMTs based on the return submitted by budget managers and service managers. This might get a bit confusing for month 2 because we're undertaking monthly budget monitoring on revenue budgets this year. So although it's based on effectively May's actuals. So the result of that process is a projected overspend of 16.5 million across the council, of which around 4.4 million relates to kind of areas within the remit of this committee. As previously reported, the council's general reserves currently stand at just above 10 million. So the council would therefore not be in a position to kind of fund an overspend in that scale currently projected. Although it is worth pointing out that obviously people always forecast more prudently in round 1, and it is based on very early data, and that can lead to kind of higher than kind of expected forecasts for what the outcome position may be. Having said that, it is worth undergoing that process to expose those risks early on, to enable us to take management action and bring it back to kind of a more palatable position throughout the year. Thanks. Happy to take questions.
Adrian.
Thank you, Joe. Whilst in round 1 an eye-watering projected overspend is nothing unusual, we've been in similar territory for years. But what worries me, what is different now, if you compare that overspend to last year, to this year, it's not 16 million overspend, it's actually 31 million pounds overspend, because you're not taking into account the extra 14.7 million pounds that was borrowed to support this year's budget. So we have a really difficult and challenging position we're finding ourselves in. That is the overall thing, but what I would like the officers that are present tonight, as has been mentioned by David, we've got over £4 million overspend, which is under the purview of this committee. Could the officers give us some indication of where they're looking to make those savings, please?
So obviously in terms of the savings, the areas that are kind of overspending at the moment are largely around staffing, some placement costs, some legal costs, and SEN transport. So I would imagine that the directorate are kind of looking at kind of schemes in those, and as we said, those forecasts are based on early data, so maybe a bit more prudent than they need to be. So as we go through and that's one of the benefits of doing monthly monitoring now, is that as we go through that monthly monitoring process, we'll get an earlier indication of how that position is kind of unfolding through the year. But in terms of the specific pieces of work, then I probably would defer to Celia and Kelly in that respect.
It appears that we're just hoping it's going to go away. I asked the specific, what are we planning to do to squeeze that overspend down? Not we just hope it goes away.
Who is kind of reporting the figures back, and actually Mariah and everybody else will work closely with Kelly and Celia to formulate those plans and bring them forward over the year. I don't know if you've got anything to add at this stage, but if you'd like to.
Just, Councillor, these are not unusual. You've already alluded to that for round 1. The big spends are still there, they're still in the system. Demand management, I'm not going to rehearse for you this evening because you know very well how we work, and it would not be responsible for me to sit here tonight and tell you exactly how this demand will be managed, because we're talking about children and young people, and demand is still high out there. And, you know, the forecast on agency staffing, we have a workforce strategy, we have all of those things that we are really sweating to make sure that these figures are on a downward trajectory, but children are still safe in Medway.
Okay. George.
Yeah, thank you. And can I first of all thank Dave and the team and Katie and yourself, Leanne, and your team for the work that you're doing. I mean, look, this is a very concerning situation. And it might be considered business as usual, albeit I'm sure my colleagues on the other side this time last year weren't telling us it was business as usual. Of course, it was the fault of the previous administration. Yeah, the leader was clear at the Budget Council meeting that this was a sustainable budget that had been built, was going to stay within the financial envelope, had been built, as Adrian just referenced, with the exceptional financial support that was provided by the permission provided by the Department of Levelling Up at the time. And we've now got a £16.5 million overspend, 11.7 million within the People Directorate, 2 million nearly in children's services and 2.6 million in education. And you know, it's very serious and it's an acute situation. And I'm afraid we can't sit here and just watch on whilst we do this, because of course what's going to happen is if these numbers don't come down, the leader of the council will be using reserves to fund the Labour group budget. So we've got 14.7 million's worth of borrowing that's had to take place in order to fund the budget. And then we potentially now are staring down the barrel of £16.5 million worth of use of reserves, which will probably, yes, come down, but still a significant amount of reserves to fund the Labour and Co-Operative budget. And, you know, that's very concerning because this is a budget that the leader told us in February was sustainable. So, I mean, my question for officers, and I appreciate that some of this is politically led and not for officers, is just why we weren't able to forecast this in, why we haven't led a significant enough buffer. How are officers, you know, as Adrian referenced, going to sort of factor this in moving forward and ensure that we reduce this? And particularly for finance, what conversations have gone on with the department for Ministry of Housing and Local Government, Communities and Local Government, about how this might impact on the exceptional financial support that the Council's got to draw down in order to fund the revenue budget for this calendar year. But to conclude, Chair, this is very concerning, and I have grave concerns about the use of reserves in order to fund this Council. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously share those concerns. In terms of the kind of the engagement with MHLG, it's obviously very early days in terms of them then coming into that kind of office. So we will be seeking a meeting with those people, as far as I'm aware, to kind of discuss all the issues that we face, not just in this kind of directorate, but across the whole piece, because obviously the whole council funding thing is an issue for the wider council, not just CYP. It's early days. I hate to say that, but it is quite early days to understand how those things are going to pan out. But obviously, and I don't want to keep saying hopeful, Councillor Golvin, but we obviously hope that those discussions will bring some kind of benefit to Medway, and we'll obviously update the committees as we go through the year.
Thank you. And obviously, you know, it's not political, but actually this is about children. And, you know, hopefully you will have learnt the lessons from closing the vicarage, because now we are paying the price of having our children elsewhere, but we're also paying the price of 14 years of austerity, cost of living and underfunding of public services. And you know, it's a bit rich, I've got to say. We've got a new government, they need a chance, and you know, you've made the country, you know, you've made it the worst I've ever seen it, and I'm nearly 100. So, you know, this is about children, and their needs need to be met because they're vulnerable children.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I mean, look, the leader said in this room that this was a sustainable budget. The leader should not have said that if he thought this was not a sustainable budget, I'm afraid. That this is a matter, this is political matter, it's a matter for the Cabinet. They shouldn't have brought the budget to Council, which you voted for, I did not, if they didn't think that the budget was sustainable. It's a simple fact. Thank you.
And it's a simple fact that you've been told 3 times it's not this unusual at this time. And, you know, you were told 23 years to get a local plan. It didn't happen. You know, talk about incompetency. We'll start with you guys. Thanks. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a comment. So, my colleague just now actually brought up a thing that your leader said. Making accusations, yes, is about the children, and the concern is that we need to be budgeting correctly for these children. My point wasn't on that. I was just looking at the education budget with the SEN transport being a big issue, and this is probably a question towards Celia. So with the projects with Althaven and Eden House, once they have completed and we've got the extra facilities there, what potential savings will we be making on with regards to them facilities not having to send children miles and miles away and paying the extortionate amounts that these other providers decide that they're going to hold people to ransom for? And also with regards to children's services, looking at provider services, really don't understand what that is at the moment, but I will be learning, Leanne, I definitely will. Looking at that, we're looking at a 10% overspend on that. I'm just wondering what is driving that as well. Thank you.
So, do you want to take one quickly? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to go with the transport one. So I don't have the exact breakdown for Althaven in terms of saving, but you're absolutely right. The more work we do to keep our children locally, the reduction in our transport costs, we will see that. We have just had completed a full review of our transport, send and mainstream, and actually it does reflect that we are paying the right amount, we are paying well for our supply of providers, and it is an increase in demand, but we do have some things that we're looking at. But yeah, the main difference, what the difference we'll make is when we're not having to send children a long way away for places.
In terms of provider services, that's where the Eden House pressure sits. We are waiting for the Ofsted approval to be given. I've worked with James, and James has worked with the service, so we think we've identified the young people who are possible eligible for going into there, and if they go in, as we expect them to do, they will deliver that saving. So what I'm trying to say is this is precautious. We are working with the service to deliver these savings. We just have to make sure everything stays on track to deliver, because the last thing we want to do is come and say, yes, we've delivered it, and then have to come back 2 months later and say we haven't. So we expect to deliver it. We're just trying to be prudent.
Leah.
So austerity has consequences. The 14 years of cut in public services has consequences on council budgets. And as a political group, we've been talking about the danger of using reserves to fund the council for decades, so it's rich to have it now thrown back at us a year in. Every service across the country is at breaking point. I hope this government address local government finances as a priority, but I understand that knowing where to start on every public service being broken, on our broken public infrastructure, will have to come down to priorities. In the meantime, I trust our Cabinet to make the best decisions, with keeping children safe being high on that priority list. But I think there's so much richness on political groupings coming from over there.
Smither.
I just wanted to add a quick point to that. As everyone said, that kind of very ironical sort of commentary on the budget. we are not delusional that 23 years of budget mismanagement is going to disappear in one budget cycle. So we were honest, we were transparent, we brought in SIPFA, we did a full audit, and we've been very transparent from day one with the public what the state of the budget was. So it's not going to disappear overnight. We are going to have to work hard at doing this, and I have full confidence that the Cabinet are working closely with the assistant ADs and all the department heads to make sure that this budget is on track and that deficit will be reduced in time. But it's delusional to try and suggest that in one budgetary cycle this is going to disappear. You can say all you like about the leader saying this and that. The leader has been transparent. We have been transparent. This administration has been way more transparent than the previous administration. And there have been no sort of overnight moving of pieces around sort of just at the leader's whim to make the numbers balance. That just does not happen. So we have an entirely new approach to this. Thank you.
Wayne, do you want to speak, or is it your mobile phone again?
No, I did actually want to speak on this point. And I want to follow on from what Mark said in relation to transport, and also echo the comments that George said in relation to his comments. And 1 year ago, your administration was saying that the overspend was disastrous, and yet we have a costed budget, apparently, which clearly is getting worse. But that aside, I want to talk about transport. There is a new transport cost plan, which is for post-16 transport and education learning policy for the academic year 24-25. I'm specifically going to be relating to those young people that are disabled, because prior to this year, they were getting free transport to take them to and from their academic institutions. They're now having, as I understand, being told by a constituent who is facing this issue at the moment and has been arguing constantly over this, they either have to contribute or pay in full. How is it that, if that is the case, we are allowing those who are disabled to actually have to pay for travel to get to school?
Celia.
So the post-16 arrangements for children with SEND haven't changed. The policy is quite clear in terms of a young person's ability to get themselves to school, their mobility. So it does depend on an individual child's or young person's need. Where they can get themselves to school, then there is no statutory duty on the council to pay. We are generous with our policy. We do, wherever possible, fund, and usually children within AHCP, that's what we look at. But a young person who's over 16, who can travel independently, isn't covered by our policy. That isn't a change. We've never covered that. We don't have a statutory duty to cover that.
Then, if I may, then I may have to contact you outside this
Yeah,
meeting, because this person in particular is wheelchair bound. And so they've got absolutely no way of getting to their education institution freely. And I personally feel for the parents and child. But we will talk about that later. Thank you, Celia.
Send it to me, yes, thank you.
Right, I'm going to take one more question. Douglas.
Thank you. My question was just to my fellow councillor across the Chamber of Joy, just to raise awareness to the cost for transporting a child that's sent across the country. If you have any awareness of what it takes to transport a young vulnerable person across the country, you would know the rising cost in fuel, the adequate staffing for the individual, sometimes it's 2 staff, plus the driver across the country is costly. We've seen it's been reported everywhere. Just off the top of the bat, spending is set to hit 1.4 billion across local authorities in England from 2023 to 2024. This is a rise of 95% from the 728 million in the 2018-219. Now, if we know that young people are presented with more acuity at the point of care because there are no health facilities in the area, that cost is going to increase. It's just what is happening. So to quote alarm to some of the figures that are born out of a lack of services, a lack of early intervention, is disingenuous. I think you just need to take a closer look at where those figures are coming from, instead of trying to mitigate them now when this is a projected budget figures at the moment. These are not the actual figures yet. Thank you.
Point of order. A point of order for what?
The comments that are being attributed to me saying about overspend on the SEN transport, my comments were not on that. My comments were on when Alt Even is open, what is the likely saving on that transport? So I understand the cost of ever going up. Running a business unit myself on fuel and getting people from A to B, and my comments were not on that because I'm aware of that. It was on potential saving once we got Alt Even open. Thank you.
I think it might have been Wayne's comments, but thank you for that. Okay, Vice Chair.
I move that the committee notes the results of the first round of revenue budget monitoring for 24-25 and notes that the Cabinet of the 31st of July 2024 is asked to instruct the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within budget agreed by full council.
Is that seconded? Thank you, Smither. And agreed? Agreed. Right, we're on the last item, the work programme. Stephanie.
I have nothing to add, Chair.
Yeah, so I don't have anything to add either. Anybody else? No, that's good. So can we go to the... Oh, sorry, Adrian. Is this being blind in the left
yes,
eye,
just
isn't it?
a quick one. There's a reference in the work programme to having another report on Cook and Wood, but I don't know whether...
We're taking that out, yeah.
We'll take that out, good. Could I suggest, though, sometime in the future, when the new secure school is up and running, I think that would be very interesting to know how that's going, performing and what's happening.
Yeah, some of us have been there already, but yeah, it would be nice. But we don't want to dysregulate children. That's the only thing, as Leanne mentioned rightly earlier. But I think you've got connections, haven't you?
We've got a very good connection with a past member of staff. So it'd be nice if he could come along and Andy could come and give us a heads up.
Because the secure school is situated in Medway, there are certain regulations and we host that. There are certain responsibilities that I have as DCS, so it is right and proper that something comes through here at least annually. So, thank you.
So we'll take Cook and Wood out and we'll have the secure school. Thank you. Vice Chair.
So I move that the committee notes the report and agrees the work programme as set out at Appendix 1 to the report, subject to accepting the proposed changes outlined in italic text on Appendix 1 and taking out the report from Cook and Wood and adding in a report from the secure school.
Is that seconded? Thank you, Paula. And agreed? Yep, thank you. Good night. Sorry we're a bit late.
you.